Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there, how are you all? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, brought to you by Kraken, the best place to buy, sell, and trade digital currencies. I'm your host, Peter McCormack, and today I've got a really special interview. I've got Chris DeRose and Junseth, who previously worked together on the Bitcoin Uncensored podcast. And before we get into it, I've got a warning. There is quite a bit of swearing in here. I know people in the past don't always like it when they're swearing. I've had some emails from people, so I do try and keep it as clean as often as I can. But this does have a bit of swearing, and we do get in some subjects which might trigger some people. So just a bit of a warning there. If that's going to bother you, or you've got your kids about, you might want to skip this or listen to it another time. Also, before we get into the show and before I talk about it, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So firstly, I'm going to talk to you about Dropbit, my new sponsor. I've been working with them for a few weeks now. Really glad to have them on board. It's the best Bitcoin wallet that I've used on a mobile. Really enjoying working with them, really enjoying developing ideas with them. And I've just got to New York. I'm here for Consensus. I'm here for a bunch of events, and I've preloaded my app with $1,000 of Bitcoin. So look, if you want some Bitcoin and you see me at any of the events, just give me a tap on the shoulder, download the Dropbit app, and I'll send you some. I've got to say, I love this app. It's really changed how I use Bitcoin. Like previously, I only tended to use it for issuing invoices or paying invoices and did everything straight to my hardware wallet. I never really used a mobile app until I downloaded Dropbit, and now I've got it. I've always got some Bitcoin on it, and I'm doing these smaller payments to people. It's become really useful, really changed the way I use Bitcoin. So it's super cool. And I think one of the reasons being is the UX on it is really amazing. It's beautifully designed, really easy to use. And also they've got some really cool stuff coming up that they've told me about. So really excited about that. If you're interested in checking out Dropbit, it's available for the iPhone and the Android. Just head over to dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app, and you can download it there. That's dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app. Also, I'm going to talk to you about BlockFi again. You know these guys. I've been working with them for ever. They've been sponsoring the podcast, I think, since August. Have an amazing relationship, and I'm going to meet up with the team tomorrow while I'm here in New York. Going to be finding out about what's coming up, what new products they're working on, also finding out how the current products are going. So I'll definitely be feeding back to you on that. And also, I'll let you know I signed up for their interest accounts. I put 20% of my Bitcoin in. Really happy to try this out. I've had my first statement, which is pretty cool. I know there are questions around the product, so I did do an interview with Zach Prince covering that. That's available on my SoundCloud. But I really like what they're doing. They're taking financial services into Bitcoin. They're doing some really cool and interesting new things. And yeah, a great company to work with. So if you want to check them out, you want to try out either their interest accounts or their crypto-backed loans, then head over to blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. That is blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. Okay, so on to the interview with Chris and Junseth. And if you don't know their podcast, Bitcoin Uncensored, you should definitely go and check it out. I've put some links into the show notes, some of the shows I listened to, which I really enjoyed. But sadly, the truth is they had an acrimonious split. They no longer make the podcast anymore. And they actually haven't talked to each other for quite a while. And I became aware of the podcast because one of the difficult things coming into Bitcoin late is sometimes you don't know the whole history of what's happened or what's gone on in the past and the different roles people have played. But a few people have come to me and said, look, check out Bitcoin Uncensored, go and listen to the work they did. And I did, and I checked it out. It was pretty awesome. Really enjoyed the shows they made, really enjoyed their perspective on things. But I kind of felt like I wanted to talk to both of them, not individually. I wanted to get them together, because they had this really amazing rapport and they did some really cool things with the way they challenged the whole kind of blockchain myth and all the altcoin projects outside of Bitcoin. So as I was coming out to New York, I reached out to them both individually and I said, look, would you be interested in doing a show together? And they were both up for it, which was super cool. So I booked an additional flight. I headed down to South Florida. We took our shirts off. We stripped half naked to record it because that was the thing they used to do. And we got nearly 3 hours in, I think, 2.5 to 3 hours, which is my longest show to date. I didn't really want to cover the split, so we don't really get into that. We tend to just talk more about the space and talk about my experiences and their experiences and how they overlap. Definitely going to be some triggering stuff in there because we do cover some controversial stuff. But it was great. I loved doing it. And you know what? My overriding perspective on it all was it's just a real shame they're not working together anymore, because the way they feed off each other is really kind of cool. They've got this real rapport that I think still exists today. They've definitely moved on. They're different people and you can see that, but they have this rapport that I just think is super awesome. I just think the podcast, well, it's a shame it doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, but I love doing it. I'm glad they both kind of went out on a limb and did this with me. And for any of you who used to listen to their show, I really can't wait for your feedback. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. And as ever, if you've got any questions about the show, you know you can reach out to me. And listen, if you are enjoying what I do and you want to support the show, then please head over to my website, www.whatbitcoindid.com. Click on the support section. It will explain everything you can do. And I want to say a big thank you to my top tier Patreon sponsor, which is Rise Wallet, a new way into Bitcoin. There are no sign-ups. You just scan the card and you are instantly holding Bitcoin. If you want to find out more, head over to risewallet.com. Okay, on to the interview. As I said, hope you enjoy it. If you've got any questions, reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. How are you both feeling?
Good. Great. Yeah, I think it's good.
Firstly, what's the thing with like having your shirts off in the shows?
Oh man, that started with Wayne. Are we on now already? Is that
We're on. We're recording.
Okay. All right. So that started with Wayne Vaughn. Wayne Vaughn came on the show one time and he got really uncomfortable because he just started a professional company, and we'd had him on, basically to discuss, I think, his new business, Tyrion, which has since done an ICO and gone on to do other things. But he came on and he was uncomfortable with the antics, but he'd asked us to come on. So I ripped my shirt off to make him even more uncomfortable and to stress the point that this was not a serious show.
And did that make it more comfortable then?
I think it made him shut up.
Yeah, we've always celebrated the irreverence. The sort of like, I don't know, a buttoned up presentation here in the space never really worked for us.
One of the early jokes was a friend of ours who started calling himself a Bitcoin professional. It was after we held a meetup at a strip club. And he was saying it wasn't good because it wasn't Bitcoin professional. And that became a mantra on the show. So Wayne, I think, represented Bitcoin professionals pretty well. And we liked to make jokes about Bitcoin professionals because it's absurd. The fact that this is a serious industry is hilarious.
But Chris is all ripped now.
Yeah, Chris is ripped. I'm still fat.
Well, what's really funny to me too is that people think that I'm being like egregious and taking my shirt off these days. But what I liked is we already like opened up the can of worms. So now I'm just being consistent. There's nothing new about this. It's just that I guess people act differently if you are ripped or something, I guess. I don't know
that Chris knew that it was a fat joke before, though. Like in part, like ripping your shirt off is funny. In my case, because I'm hideous.
Well, I went on, when I went to create the banner, I couldn't find a decent photo of either of you on Google, so I stalked you both out on Facebook.
Yeah, I noticed. You got one on a wedding photograph.
But then I go through Chris's, and like I'm on his profile, I go 2, 3, and then there's one with his shirt off, and he's ripped. I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah, he got ripped.
Should we take our shirts off?
Yeah, we can.
Let's do it. Let's take our shirts off. I'm a bit fat myself.
All right. Makes people just get a little weird. Why not?
At least it's not on camera this time. Well, Peter, okay. Well, Peter's similarly hideous.
Yeah, I'm a fat dude as well.
Yeah, not as fat as me.
Yeah,
but got a lot of tattoos.
There were a lot of over-unders on how many times the word fart would be said today, so I was pretty... I haven't had a lot of opportunities yet to make a fart joke, but
if somebody walks past the window, they're going to be... Well, actually, we're in Miami. They're going to be, whatever.
Yeah.
This is normal.
You're right. I was at a pool here.
So listen, look, I'll tell you where I'm going to start from.
All right.
You two obviously have a lot of history. I'm kind of new around here. And one of the things in being new around here is there's like a huge amount of gaps in knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Tech, the economics of it, everything that's happened, the changing narratives. Like even you guys, and I got invited to go to a football match with a guy called Danny Brewster, who also has a lot of history, right? But anyway, he said, I've got tickets for Liverpool Man City. Do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah. So we're driving up there. And he was like, have you ever listened to Bitcoin Uncensored? And I'm like, well, I know Chris. And he was like, no, you need to go back and listen to the show with the two of them. So I went back and I did. And I was like, I saw the Fluffy Pony one where you're drawing the tie on you.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is fucking awesome. Anyway, some time passed, and then like I saw some stuff had gone on between you guys. We don't have to dig into it, but I wasn't aware of the whole past. But what that reflected to me is there's so much of the past I'm not aware of, and it's a really hard thing coming in. Like, say I came in, let's say end of 2016, 2017. It's been really fucking hard on many levels, getting lots of challenges, and one of the things that I've noticed is that like there was a big shift in the narrative in Bitcoin in say. Maybe like 14, 15, I can't explain where, but listening to your podcast, you talked a lot about the use case for Bitcoin, like drugs and prostitutes. So it was a medium of exchange, right? It was censorship resistance. And then it's all kind of changed. And the defense of what it is now has become really fucking super hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Bitcoin is has changed. The narrative of what it is has changed a number of times since it started. And I think that was, at least in my opinion about the show, that was what we explored, was the fact that nobody was talking at the time about who uses Bitcoin. And that's sort of where it evolved from, is that, frankly, everybody was a little bit afraid to admit that Bitcoin was used for these types of transactions, and that those were the most, there's a lot of good examples. Like a couple of years ago, I remember TNABC, was it 2016, where Dash had that event at 11 down in Miami. And, a bunch of women came out and said that was a terrible thing for them to have done, and that it was discriminatory. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, the women at that club are the first people that use Bitcoin in that entire city. And it's a little bit interesting that, like, you would criticize Dash for holding a meetup there for that reason. No one talked about it then. I think that there's more people aware of it now.
My take on that is, I mean, there's essentially two battling demographics in the space. There is the people who need Bitcoin, and then there is effectively the confidence men who are selling Bitcoin. And there's a very different sort of ethic attached to both of those demographics. And I think for myself, and for a lot of people who are early, they were here because they saw something that they needed, a solution and a meaning in those intersections. And then when the confidence men showed up, it got completely outrageous and crazy and detached from what was a semblance of like science and like a rationale. And it just turned into whoever could create the biggest promises. And I don't know, it just got like iteratively absurd, which I don't know. Like my attitude on that now is that, like, the regulations probably exist to keep that from happening in incumbent markets, but since they weren't here, there were absolutely no controls on it. So the level of perpetual motion schemes that were promoted over the years just got increasingly absurd.
And they were promoted by not just rubes, right? A16Z did the 21 butt box. And, a little miner that you could basically, it was a Raspberry Pi attached to what looked like a gramophone kind of tube that would suck air in. It was this, like, when the original PowerPoint was released, you see this PowerPoint that basically pitched what was a perpetual motion machine that would just generate money forever and ever and ever. And, that's, to me, I think Chris is right about that. I think that's exactly correct, that there were those two kind of demographics that showed up here. And, early on I was a little different. I didn't see a whole lot of utility in it, but I was an anarchist, and I thought that we could overthrow the government using Bitcoin, which I think is a perspective that's changed since, those early days, for me at least.
I did an interview a few weeks back with the guy who started SpankChain, and I don't really have much interest in the token, but the mission, if they are authentic about the mission.
Spankings?
Well, no, so they've got Bootycorn as well. But the mission, if they're authentic about it, is actually a good one. It's helping people who work in the sex industry to be able to earn money, right? And they've created their own stable coin because there were a bunch of people that were first using it and using ETH, and the price of ETH dropped. So whatever they earned had dumped. But from that, I ended up interviewing a porn star, Ali Eve Knox, and she was like, Bitcoin saved me. I got deplatformed from PayPal. I got closed bank accounts. Started using Bitcoin, and I could accept money. And it was just like like a harsh reality that it saved her. She actually got deplatformed from Coinbase as well. It's kind of funny. But a lot of the time when I've been doing this, there's like one of the really interesting things that I've found is that you start to explore topics. But if you start to explore like an area and you go off the beaten path or off the narrative which has been kind of perpetuated by maybe leaders in the space, people kind of want to control you and stop having that opinion, which I find really, really difficult. And the reason I bring this up is that I understand the technical and economic arguments for why Bitcoin has become a store of value. But when I said recently, I have certain sympathies for big blockers who want to focus on utility. Like, I had that sympathy. I got attacked for it, but I was like, what is even wrong with exploring this?
I can answer that. The scamps effectively have power over a degree of ignorance in their audience. So they magicalize that ignorance. And like you see this in carnival games where if you are, showing somebody like an arrogant rube effectively, like a basketball game, they don't know it's rigged. They think that they're going to show off with a girlfriend, and like that arrogance is what's monetized. So here in the space, a lot of times, if you explore the ignorance, it reduces the meaning for the audience because they've been led astray. And then it also reduces a lot of the power for the confidence men or the pitch men or whoever, is probably shooing you away. And that's that demagicalization effect that you're creating now as a result of that, which for me, I always loved that, frankly. I just don't really care at this point, especially because magic is this is fascinating and you always want to find out where it exists. And it never does exist, but you can at least find out a lot of information and end up better off than you started by going down that path.
Not to mention that in Bitcoin, that there's, the magicization is rooted in the complexity of what this entire system does. So, I mean, people look at this and they're like, that's fucking way too complicated for me. I don't understand what the hell's going on there. And so you can tell them anything. And 10-minute blocks? Why 10? 5-minute blocks? Why not 4-minute blocks? Why not half a second blocks? And for most people, faster is better. And that's as much comprehension as most people have. So there's no understanding of why we have 10-minute blocks or why it doesn't really matter. Or, I said early on that the only block time that really matters is 0 seconds because what are you going to use that for? Right. And you look at the transaction volume on these chains, and at least in terms of capacity, they're all around the same. They all have the same sort of universal limitations, whether it's, size of chips or size of bandwidth or whatever the case is.
Well, one thing I'll also add to that is if you look at a faith healing environment, typically, as I understand it, 20% or so of the people in attendance are believing that a faith healing is occurring. The other 80% harbor some degree of skepticism or even ambivalence about what's going on, but they will act the part of the faith healer because it creates more community cohesion.
And I can talk to that. I mean, as a Christian, that's literally for me, one of the biggest gripes I have with religion is that when I was a kid, I would be told that, if you want to feel God, you just pray to him. And then everyone around me would tell me that they feel God. And I just never felt it. I could never hear him. They would tell me they hear him. And I would be like, I'm listening. I don't hear dick. And so it's the same way with and I think this is a religion. I think it's very obvious. People come here, they pick their factions, they go off into their corners, and then they yell at everyone else for being a heretic. I don't think that that's incorrect.
So where are you now, both of you individually? Where are you now with Bitcoin? And I've got two questions actually. Where are you now with Bitcoin? And also, I can't remember. I think it might have been you, Chris, who said it in the Kleiman interview. No, in the Perian interview, where you were like, "There's only one proven use of a blockchain. Nothing else has worked. Has anything else worked yet?"
I mean, my attitude at this point is that liquidity is the product. That is what is being offered, and liquidity exists as a result of the regulatory environment or the lack thereof in any given circumstance. And for me, and Junseth's probably different. I have no idea, but for me, what sign you put on that risk of liquidity that has been defined is kind of irrelevant at this point. It's very much a combination of speculation, a little bit of utility, and that's generally the case. So for me, where I'm at with the Bitcoin at this point is that indexing is fantastic, and a lot of new products have shown up there. And for me, it's a great ethic for the space, and it's a great solution because wherever value is being created in the sector, I tap into it now through automated tools, and I basically do nothing. And honestly, that's been the secret to success in this space for almost everybody that I know who's made an outlandish sum of money is effectively to do nothing. And it generally has been to hold Bitcoin. But I think, if we look back at the old shows, if we're being honest, there's a lot of value that we didn't capture in the case of Ethereum, say, that an index would have provided access to. Or maybe you don't know that.
I think that's true. But I think to be fair, I mean, a number of times we even said, I think if you go back to the old shows, I don't know where you'd find it, but I think we caveated it heavily that Ethereum could very easily pump. And I think it did. And I think we said many times that it could be 10 years or 15 years or 20 years before one of these collapse. I mean, the thing is, I think that it's hard. You have to acknowledge that we've never seen a chain, for the most part, really just utterly collapse. I think Aurora coin and I think even coiled coin is still around, at least in some iteration. And those are old coins that had, strange attack vectors and people, I think coiled coin is one that Luke Dash Jr., through his mining power at and 51%ed.
Yeah. I mean, I would add to that too, that I'm very ambivalent about the technology at this point. If in fact the regulatory environment is such that the regulators want to see blockchain, quote unquote, work, I don't even know how much we need proof of work at this point, because proof of work existed as a regulatory arbitrage solution that doesn't make any sense in a regulatory environment that just explicitly permits these things to, I don't know, be like developer signed or something. So yeah, that's worth considering as well. I think that I put way too much emphasis on the technicals, which it's not that they're wrong per se. It's just that like the world changed for now.
I was going to say, I think that the difference here would be between like I guess in the investment world, you talk like a short-term thesis versus a long-term thesis. And my thesis on blockchain, Bitcoin has always been sort of this long-term thesis. I don't think you end up in a world with hundreds of blockchains. I think you end up with one, maybe three, maybe two experimental or something. I think Chris is in a little different place. I don't know for sure, but when I hear that, I think of it's more of a short-term thesis. Like today, that's true, but then I see things like with the social media bannings and all sorts of things. I think that there is a place in the world for censorship resistance, and I think that Bitcoin does that with money very, very well. But to that end, I mean, if the government were to allow developers to sign transactions and that were A-okay with everybody, then yeah, you wouldn't need proof of work. I don't think that that's the state of the world, at least not for long, if it is today.
Well, the history of money is one of turmoil and change. So it's feasible to me that like I could very easily see cases where Bitcoin would fail in spectacular ways, and the people would immediately proceed to use and run the Bitcoin 2.0 that replaces it. And
sure,
we can talk about that, but maybe it is a case that there's only like three or so that are actively in mainstream use at any given time. But I could also see that being a rotating cast of three.
But what's the difference between being happy to kind of trade something and transfer value back to yourself and believing in something that's actually useful and has a role in society? Because I guess I don't think you would have said this maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like been a shift in your mindset there. And is that to do with you, I don't know, just caring less? Because this space can smash you around, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, you got to consider that like everyone's comprehension, like I'm not immune from the echo chamber effects and like the iterative forces that like cause you to like reconsider the same things in new light. I guess, what's what you're investing in when you buy Bitcoin is either a sign, and it is just literal sign value. It's very similar to when you buy like a purse or something. Some purses look identical to others, but there's a different sign on the purse, so that makes it worth more. Like that Veblen sort of like status could exist to some degree. That's one thing you could be investing in. The other thing you could be investing in is leadership, just plain and simple. The difference between LTC and BTC is the leadership structure. They have almost identical technicals. And like the leadership might be like this power hierarchy that is the Bitcoin like intolerance, or it could be, the Bitcoin core team, which, I would be more sympathetic to. But I guess like the meaning, as it were, it seems to have just eroded substantially at this point. I think because of some of the leadership dynamics that were at work. And it really isn't any one person's fault, but,
I just don't think the numbers back that up. I mean, I think that hash power is at an all-time high. I think transactions that are an all-time high. I think that like Bitcoin's chugging along, and I like completely understand why people use these other currencies. I think most of them are, we talked about it on the show all the time, speculators versus users. And I don't think that to me, the farther along we've gotten, the less interesting a lot of these other projects have become. And I see that, I mean, like, people are still picking religions. EOS is kind of the one that everyone is talking about now in China, saying that everybody's on their gambling. I mean, maybe, but for how long? We've seen that before. That's exactly what BitShares was doing. And we've, the top 10 of the crypto market has shifted and changed so much. And Bitcoin continues to kind of chug along and just be that, stable workhorse. And it does exactly what it does. I don't think outside of Bitcoin, people really know what these other currencies or cryptocurrencies are. And I think within sort of this myopic bubble of cryptocurrency, people pick a religion.
Yeah.
Well, I would add to that. I mean, Bitcoin is first mover advantage coin. It just seems to me that is the huge part of its proposition. And maybe that's enough for everybody going forward. But it also seems to me that the utility is a fairly like commoditized offering. And who offers the liquidity is kind of irrelevant to the fundamental value people. And to the speculators, like it's just a matter of like what the virtue of the month might be, I think, in terms of what gets the most liquidity. If the virtue is like, the defeating Amazon or defeating the banks, I suppose that like the liquidity would map that virtue or something.
Well, that's presuming it's a libertarian coin, right?
Well, I don't know. Right, exactly.
Well, so the way I think about it is, and I thought about it recently, and I just liquidated everything that I had that wasn't Bitcoin into Bitcoin. And the reason
That's why you're shirtless.
That's why I'm shirtless. Yeah. But the reason I did that is I use Bitcoin. I fundamentally use it. So my entrance back in 2016 was, I've talked about this a lot, was buying that treatment for my mother that I couldn't buy without Bitcoin. It's like, okay, cool. Medium of exchange, censorship resistance, dark web, it worked for me. And now I use it within running the podcast. So today, spoke to another potential sponsor and we talked about the terms of a deal. And then I said, look, do you mind paying them in Bitcoin? And they're like, no. And the reason I ask is not as some like, just to support the space. I'm based in the UK. They're based in the US. It's so much easier for me to get paid in Bitcoin. Like the Bitcoin is transferred in 10 minutes, or the blocks is every 10 minutes. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half for it to be confirmed, and then I can do a very quick sell, and it's in my account. Whenever anyone pays me via the bank, it takes at least 24 to 36 hours. Plus, I pay massive fees. Like I found out the other day, I'm paying 3.2% above the exchange rate for that. So it actually solves a problem for me. So I'm like, okay, I've got utility for that. I've got a purpose. And also, if the store of value proposition is correct, and if the 21 million scarce asset is correct, my expectation is with utility in 20 years, whatever I hold in my long-term pot might be a pension. I can't see that with Litecoin happening. I just can't. I could see it happening with Litecoin if Bitcoin didn't exist.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if happens if Bitcoin is regulatorily inhibited?
I don't worry about that because I think it survives that. My worry is it gets destroyed in another way. You know, there is some 51% attack or there is some bug we don't know about. But even most of those I'm starting to not too worry too much about. It just feels like something I'm using. But like somebody put out on Twitter the other day about Ethereum, and I can't remember what he put about it. It was like something about usage. And I said, it's only used by developers to build stuff that nobody's using.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's you look at the DApp numbers, how many people are using them. There's nobody using any of the Ethereum DApps. Almost nobody.
I think that was always a red herring. Is the easy answer to some of these.
That's what Vitalik said.
Yeah.
After all, so I don't disagree with that. But yeah, I think that in my world, Bitcoin is the behemoth, and it's in some ways you're investing in leadership, but insofar as, I would say that this is a specialized space and there's very few developers who are competent, and the ones that are truly competent and know what they're doing, I think tend to be working on Bitcoin. And I don't think that they're that interested in working on Litecoin because it's exactly the same code.
Well, but that's the other point, right? It's open source. So like their contribution necessarily is rendered to some degree irrelevant if it's just technicals, because anybody has access to that. So
absolutely.
I think you're going to come right back to leadership. Like
maybe
leadership by technical competence, but I think leadership is probably the apex of the assessment. That's my theory. Audience can decide.
I imagine there's some really competent developers working on Ethereum. Really competent.
Yeah, you'd imagine that.
I would imagine. But do you know what? Whenever
have you interviewed any?
Well, yeah. But I imagine they're competent developers. Like they know how to build stuff that nobody else does. But I always come back. I used to have a web design agency, and I always used to say there's 3 components to a successful website. There's the account manager who makes sure the client's happy. There is the designer who makes sure it's usable, and the developer who can build it. You take one of those out, it breaks down. You take out the account manager, they might design something beautiful and usable, but it's not what the client asked for.
Sure.
Or you take out the designer and they build something that the client asked for, and it's technically works, but the users come in and they can't use it. You have to have all 3. And what I think I found in kind of Bitcoin and perhaps even Ethereum is there aren't enough people who sit above what they're building and just saying, is this practical? Is anyone going to use this? Is this solving a problem? And is it easy to use? And I think a lot of that is missing.
They're all 16. I mean, that was the joke back in the day, and I don't think it's untrue today, where you have this blockchain. I mean, it's if you were to ask, I think, a number of the developers of Bitcoin, they would say the idea itself was always something that everyone knew you could do, but that it was a bad idea. Putting these programs on a blockchain, these smart contracts to run complete language on a blockchain. It was always an ill-conceived idea. It was not a good idea, but that it was something that we knew that we could do. And I think that Ethereum has kind of progressed along that ethos, and I think that they have not attracted maybe the mature minds that I see in other blockchains. It's just, it's people who dream. It's Jefferson Starship kind of, we can go to Mars. It's the Elon Musk of blockchains in some ways. They just make promises and promises and I would say, move the football down, particularly with regard to security concerns, where I think people, there's a security breach. What do? They kick the can, they patch it and they glue it together in a way that is probably problematic. The market doesn't seem to think it's problematic. It's astounding to everybody. And then another security breach, and then they do the same thing. And then that patch creates another security breach, and then they do the same thing. And it's astounding to me that you never really see the market respond in a negative way to that. And it reminds me a lot of, Tesla.
Well, they do respond, but it becomes a tribal argument. It's like...
Well, it's virtue investing. That's what you're investing in, is like affirmational content, I would suggest.
We might delve into the world where I don't always understand you, Chris, and we've talked about this. That's fine.
If you look at like Theranos and like Elizabeth Warren, my favorite feminist, that's what she offered. She offered like a woman in Steve Jobs' body. That's what you were investing in. And like Ethereum had a very similar sort of
Steve Jobs in a woman's body.
Yeah, that's what she got.
It was the other way around.
Steve Jobs
in a woman's body.
What I say?
A woman in Steve Jobs' body.
Yeah. The point is the same.
That might have been Steve Jobs.
Who knows? Who knows? But the point is the same. Is that like people were you have this virtue signaling mechanism online, and like blockchain is the extension of that. Like it is a virtue signaling economy in many ways, and so like it is.
Well, it's become that. I don't know that it started.
Well, I think Vitalik invented that. I honestly think that he gets credit for that, and whether or not that's like a nefarious invention, I don't care, because value was created up till now. And so, like, evaluating him, I think, in the rubric of what was accomplished is as irrelevant as evaluating Theranos.
That may very well be true, and I think it also needs to be said that that's not what he set out to invent.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
But this
happy accident.
Yes. Well, So let me ask you: this kicking the can down the road, and like Ethereum is this, and now it's that. How is that different from a pivot that which we are allowed in tech? Like people say, oh, it's a scam because it was well computed. It's not well computed. It's this. Look, I understand the change in narrative, but technology has a history of people changing what it is through pivots, right?
Sure.
So is Ethereum pivoting, or is it a scam?
Scams are hard. I mean, I think so. We called everything a scam, and largely because it was funny.
But people still called everything
true.
a scam.
It was very true. 100% true. Everything was. Everything was a scam.
I think we highlighted the entire page.
I think. I think it's true. Like you had a list of projects, and you'd be like, "All right, that's a scam. That's a scam. And you talk about why is it a scam, and you'd have very good reasons. It's very obvious. I mean, these were all scams. And it was never to the knowledge of the person who was pitching it either. And, what is Ethereum today? I mean, I would still go by, I would say that it's not what it purports to be. It's not what it claims to be. There's a lot of people who are buying it. I don't know if really anybody's using it. I mean, it goes in my book down as like what a scam looks like. I guess that's about as far as I'd go there.
Well, sometimes when people use the term scam, I'm like, when I think of scam, I think of somebody sitting there and going, right, I'm going to fuck you. I'm gonna do this.
When we started, that's what everyone else thought too.
Yeah. But people say, but I'm thinking I'm gonna screw you over. I'm doing this, and I know it's wrong, and I know I can make money of it. But I don't think Vitalik is sitting there thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna corner." I think he believes in what he's doing.
I think you haven't watched enough BU.
No, but it's almost like this is going to be controversial. Roger Ver has done a lot of terrible, terrible things, right?
Oh, that is going to be controversial.
No, he's done a lot of things that are wrong, right? But I'm
a Ver fan at this point, honestly.
But what I would say is about him is I think I'm pretty sure he believes that Bitcoin should be peer-to-peer cash. I don't think he created Bitcoin Cash to make a bunch more money and scam people. I think he genuinely believes that. And I think this overuse of the term scam has actually allowed scams to perpetuate because it's kind of not like I think we should create almost categories of legitimate, stupid, and scam, or legitimate, it can't work, scam. But calling everything a scam just becomes pointless.
Well, I mean,
it makes it easier to scam.
I don't know if that's true. I think that humans want to be scammed. I think that's one of the things that we have been watching. I mean, like, look, I think originally in the space when we had all of these libertarians here crying and saying, I should be allowed to invest in whatever I want. And I mean, I think that was the first time that we ever did anything was, remember up in Disney, there was very obvious Ponzi that had sponsored the conference. Like 100% a Ponzi scheme. Nobody seemed to disagree. And I stood there at the table, and every single person that came by and was being pitched by them, I would let them know this is a very obvious Ponzi. And at the end of that, I had a number of people come up to me, some fairly prominent libertarians in the space, saying I was going to give them my money. Thank you so much for telling me that was a Ponzi scheme. And I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind that these people who tell me that they know what they should and shouldn't invest in are so willing to be scammed. They showed up here wanting to give their money to this thing, which was just obviously a Ponzi scheme, which I think 2 weeks later went belly up.
Well, again, it's a combination of the faith healers that are looking for the faith healing believers who are looking for like some affirmational magic. Those people want to stop the person who's preventing the faith healing. And then there's also the people that are in on the pyramid scheme. I mean, a wise financial decision is to join the pyramid scheme in the beginning and then leave before it collapses. And there's a lot of those people out there as well.
Which is what people accuse Bitcoin, like us Bitcoiners, of doing.
I mean, you could say that about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it reflects a state of, every business. I mean, you look at businesses, they have a life cycle, right? They start out and they live for 30 years or 50 years or 100 years. It depends on the business. And then they die. And they die for various reasons. Sometimes they go bankrupt. Sometimes they were running, great for 30 years. And then, all of a sudden they're out of money one day. It just, the Ponzi scheme isn't that much different in terms of how it looks than, any other business. The question is just how long and how deep does it go?
I think you and I both realized the value of regulation early into the show, very begrudgingly. And it seems like there is a lot of nuance in determining what kinds of Ponzi's are sustainable and which ones aren't. And so I think a lot of the scam assessments were levied based on traditional metrics, which I think are still probably valid, but not in a world where the regulators don't show up. So
I think that's fair. I mean, that's the thing. The regulations have not come into this space. We just saw, the whole ICO thing ended because it was stupid, not because anyone stepped in.
I don't think it's over yet.
I wouldn't be surprised if it pumps again, if we see another big round of this.
Well, so one thing I've noticed is that the market's become so correlated. It wasn't when I was first investing and trading, it was almost like when Bitcoin went up, everything else went down. And when Bitcoin went down, everything went up. And there were some things that didn't correlate, and it's kind of like there was some skill to investing.
That's the meme with George Soros hanging all of the alts on his fingers.
Yeah, but there was a certain amount of skill. Like everything kind of went up over a long enough time frame. But you had to find out who had a new logo coming out, because if they had a new logo coming out, it would pump or some stupid dumb thing like that. The whole thing's like regulated now, and correlated. And one of the things I thought, it's a shame that Bitcoin's doubled in price over the last kind of month or so, because with a bit longer, a few more of these things would have died, but everything's gone up, everything's correlated, which is a kind of shame.
Well, you mean like you think that if it had stayed where it was, then they would have run out of money?
Quicker, yeah,
for
sure.
That would have been Ethereum.
But that thing has,
agreed.
Thing, well, so we've now got the initial exchange offering, which for me, I can't see the difference between that and IPO.
An initial exchange offering?
Yeah, different than that and an ICO. I just don't see the difference.
Postmodern finance, so everyone relabels the rows by another name, and then they articulate based on that. It's hope-based, not evidence-based. And so that's what you see with that.
It used to be tokens, right? We'd sell tokens. It'd be Mastercoin. Before that, there was MPEX. Remember MPEX?
Vaguely, I do.
That was Merch's. Mercha had a stock market that you could sell and buy stocks on. It was command line, I think, only.
Yeah.
I had no idea how to use it. It's so hard to use. But MPEX was this like little thing that people would go on. I think Satoshi's Dice went public on it. Went public, quote unquote, public on MPEX, and a number of other little companies that you could buy. And there were early sort of stock markets that were completely unregulated in the Bitcoin space.
Well, something I throw
one of which I put my money into and got scammed.
per your point though, like I don't think humans, like there is a degree of like this postmodern situation going on, whatever, lamented or otherwise, I don't care. But I was talking to a regulator, I think it was at the CFTC, who was like articulating the case for Bitcoin in these commodity terms that was not ironic. He fully believed that this was a digital rock and that wasn't run by humans. And so there's power in what you call a thing. And it seems like in the modern world, I don't know, the skepticism hasn't formed yet, or the like innate ability to detect rhetoric from reality is no longer present. And so people are trying out words to see where the ignorances are. And
right. Well, it's
sometimes
like how,
they fly.
It's like how finance is talking about, revolutionizing finance with blockchain. And then you find out that they've been doing a blockchain project. Like, we've been working on this since 2006. We're really excited about the advent of blockchain. And then they release their thing. And it's like, I don't know, Zelle. It's some, just normal financial product that they're using MySQL databases with. And, now we call those blockchains. And it's astounding because it really is. People don't care what you call it. The rhetoric can't be separated from what is reality.
Well, then how the fuck does anyone ever navigate this? And this is one of the...
You can't.
I think you can. There's theories and books and academics on this, but there's so much illiteracy in the space, you can't bring any attention to the matter.
The problem is that you can't because of the sheer volume of retardation.
Yeah, I agree. The literacy is very high.
What are you going to do? Like, you can't parse out, like, Tim Swanson from Bitcoin Uncensored. And, like, in our case, we tried to cast ourselves as the dumbest people in the room. And I think we successfully did because we were. And you can't ascertain the quality of the information we're giving as opposed to someone who puts a suit and tie on.
You can, but this is very, so everybody believes the authority that is Bitcoin Core say. So, like, that agency is authorized to extend some degree of authority elsewhere, but they refrain to do so.
That's fair. There is credentialism. Like, that's, I guess, the only way you could do that.
That's how ICANN did it. That's how any successful currency in this space, I believe, would probably do it ultimately. But the rhetoric is crazy, so people go ballistic when you suggest that.
And to that end, I think it does have some problem. Like we talked a lot about on the show about, markets being efficient. And one of the parts of efficient market hypothesis is that you have this notion that all news in the market is taken and then priced in. And I just don't think that that's possible in this space because the information is so contradictory. The majority of the information is at best inaccurate.
Well, the incentives are to create disinformation in many cases.
Well, so this is where I come to something I've wrestled with and a lot of the challenges I've had, especially recently. We talked about the Rise interview before this.
Sure.
In that I'm wrestling with this thing where I'm like, I'm pretty much a Bitcoiner, right? I pretty much know everything else is probably bollocks, right? And I should, it's all I own and it's all I'm interested in. But I have a healthy curiosity that maybe other stuff may work, or maybe I should at least talk to these people and understand where they're coming from and understand their point of view. So therefore, I'll go and do an interview that other people aren't happy with. But then somebody will argue back and go, well, you shouldn't do that because you're allowing misinformation to get into the space. And then I'm like, oh, maybe you're right. And then I just get fucking lost. I don't know what to do with it.
It's hard to be an honest broker. I mean, I think we tried it early on with Counterparty. It was a coin that we were interested in. It's built on Bitcoin, so it kind of hit all the metrics that we thought were important. And I give credit to Chris for this. He, I think, identified this early that entire system could have been built without the token, and is now the best projects on it are probably starting to be built without the inbred token XCP. I think it's really hard to not settle or find a religion here that at least is intriguing to you.
Well, I mean, yeah, the other part of this too is that, like, for me, it doesn't matter if the thing works or not. It just matters whether or not people believe it works. I mean, it's very Keynesian, and I understand that, like, there's this demonization of that, but I just want to make the money at this point. I'm not like sacrificing for the team here, because it seems as if number one, the team is like incorrigible, but number two, like, if empathy is what runs this thing, then go home. You already lost. So I don't think that I think anti-fragility is achieved by hardening these systems in this way. And that's how capitalism was supposed to work. Whether or not it does, we'll find out, I guess, in this space.
See, this is where I'm now starting to understand the Briar Patch a bit more.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that place at first.
There's like, many
what?
levels of comprehension there, and everybody likes to fuck with everybody, and it's a den of thieves, I think, in that way.
I think it's a den of contrarians.
And that too.
You say X and they'll say Y. And
Yes.
at first I was like, you're all being dicks. And then I listened to it. I was like, oh no, I get it now. You're challenging me. Yeah. You're challenging your thinking. And now I understand it. But I think that's kind of similar to the whole space, in that I think we need these contrarian views. We need to be challenged. All right, look, let's run through some. We covered, I think we know where we are with Bitcoin, but I'd be really interested on your opinions on some things. Okay, I'm going to say Tether and then broad stable coins. I struggle to call Tether itself inherently a scam. Let's put to the side, there's some questions at the moment about, did they have the balances? Have they, what's happened, blah, blah,
Sure.
blah. But there is a genuine utility to Tether for Bitcoiners. It's kind of like a nice sister project that helped you come in and out of Bitcoin on exchanges where maybe you didn't have KYC. And I kind of got that. And I'm kind of been always okay with Tether. And in some ways, I've always preferred Tether from the newer stable coins, the regulated ones with their blacklist addresses run by the Winklevoss and people like that. So where are you with something like Tether and generally stable coins?
I mean, I
think there's genuine, like, just to start with, Tether's not new. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just Liberty, it's digital Liberty dollars in the way that Bitcoin is digital gold or digital, it's euro dollar. It's obviously useful. I'm amazed that it can exist, though, because their bank exists or their money exists in a bank account, and the government can just show up at that bank one day and be like, that's our money now. And now Tether's a dead project. So I'm amazed that it's been able to run this long. I think that Liberty dollars and e-gold ran for 5, 10, 15 years, some of them. And we'll see how long Tether goes. It just takes one or two really, really bad people to decide to use Tether and to have their transactions tied back to Tether for Tether to, basically be a thing that the government decides is a big problem now.
Well, that was Liberty Reserve's problem, right? It was used for money laundering.
You couldn't prevent that.
Yeah, even yourself, you didn't like the blacklisting of the alternative. So like the efficiency of Tether is in its regulatory arbitrage.
It's literally in its
always the
ability
efficiency.
the Tether's. I mean, it has a number of reasonable reasons to exist, but its real utility is going to be when ISIS discovers it and can hold dollars.
It's already started. I mean, we already have this $800 million that is being used for criminal activity, which you wouldn't hear this in the Bitcoin space, but looking at some of the court documents and reading elsewhere, it's not a small crime, really. It's actually kind of a big deal.
In what way?
Well, someone's going to go to jail, probably for
a lot of people
life.
are probably going to go to jail.
And that
probably
makes
not for life. It's probably 7 years.
Maybe 7 years.
Martin Shkreli level criminals.
I don't know. It was pretty high end. I don't know if drug crimes are what they used to be. So maybe only 7 years.
I think you get 5 years now for drug crimes. We put Ross in for life, but I think you get the second Silk Road. I think was 5 years. So
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. Whole life, then 5 years.
Yeah,
for the same crime.
Well, they're different crimes. One did it first.
The other thing that's weird about Tether is that, everybody knows it's fractional, yet it's still trading at $1. I'm waiting for George Soros to come in here and start bankrupting them, if that's possible.
Well, this is my entire point about libertarian criticism of banks, by the way. You want this world where you have the state of nature, and I think that's really the libertarian goal. And no one seems to point out to them that fractional reserve banking is the state of nature. You need regulation to stop it. So what do you think Tether's going to do? It's an unregulated dollar-to-dollar peg currency run by Phil. What do you think he's going to do with it? He's going to fractionalize. It has to happen. He's going to mix customer funds because, it's this sort of decentralized bank. And when everybody discovers that it's fractional, they're going to be like, yeah, but is it as fractionalized as a bank?
Well,
and they're going to discover it's not.
So I tweeted about that recently. So there was a lot of defense to the fractional tethers on the defense that it's not as bad as the bank. You want to see how much they fractionalize.
There you go. I didn't even know that. I knew that would be where they go.
No, but it was that was a number of people defended who were compared to your banks, it's not as bad. But I was like, but isn't this what we're meant to be getting away from? Isn't this why we've came to Bitcoin? Because we don't want this shit.
Weirder than that, where is the Tether fund sitting?
Is it Noble Bank?
Oh, it's in a bank. So it's not worse than a bank, but they haven't done the math where they realize that it's fractionalized on top of being fractionalized in the way that they think is the worst kind of fractionalization. It's so dumb.
The meaning has really gotten kind of moot. I mean, number go up is really the overarching theme at this point. So whatever meaning you have,
and Tether number goes sideways. We like that.
Yeah.
Number go up is always going to win the morality game around here. It just seems it's really not. It's short-sighted. It's short-term thinking, but it's what it bears out. So the meaning, as it were, could be said to be any number of things. But at the end of the day, the cries of the neurotics online is just going to be number go up, and that's that.
So do you think people really, when they talk about hard money and the best money we've ever had and overthrowing governments, do you really just think they're thinking, sell this narrative, I get rich?
Yeah, they're searching for holy words. If hard is holy, then Bitcoin is that.
Those are 1,000-page book libertarians. And so there's different kinds of libertarians. There's the 50-page pamphlet libertarians. Those are the ones that enjoy Locke And then there's the 1,000-page book libertarians, and those are the Misons. And those are the ones making the arguments about hard money and, better money and blah, blah, blah. And it's fine. Money's on a spectrum, and it's still new. Like, you look at like modern currency, you don't go back that far before you get to this Mississippi Company, which is, essentially the progenitor of all modern, bills. And it's only recent that we've taken those bills and put them in a digital sphere. I mean, I remember when we were arguing early on, we were arguing whether like credit cards were substantially different from, a card on your phone, or a digital card. And that was like a point of contention early on with us, because sort of the dematerialization of a lot of this stuff is new to all of us. And people don't realize the difference between, one thing that looks similar to another thing and another thing. Like when we came to Bitcoin, we didn't know that settlement on your credit card wasn't really settlement until later. We didn't know what netting was. We didn't know what KYC and AML were.
Skeuomorphism didn't enter like popular lexicon until Apple popularized it in roughly, iPhone era. And now you see the like ramifications of that elsewhere.
Okay, so would we have a better world with hyper Bitcoinization and everyone using Bitcoin, or is it all a big myth?
Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, like, the world progresses.
It's the utopia. Everything's perfect in the utopia.
The world progresses towards a better place, always. Unless feminists get there. Just kidding. No, the world progresses towards a better place. I mean, I firmly believe that. You have little blips. You have like, Mao China and Lenin Russia or Stalinist Russia. You have blips. But the world's goal is to always progress toward better. So, I mean, would hyper-Bitcoinization help? I don't know. I mean, probably not. It'd probably come with its own set of problems, and it would probably come with its own set of benefits.
It's just an imagination thing. It doesn't really exist.
You don't get that world.
Yeah. My answer is that it's a perfect world. And A, that means it's beautiful and everything's perfect, but B, it means it's irrelevant because like that's never going to happen. So, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't like believe in Bitcoin for various reasons, but like it's just a shared utopia, I think.
Right. Okay. So what about Safedean's Bitcoin standard then?
Oh man.
The moose.
The moose? The moose.
The moose. Bullwinkle.
I like Safedean.
He blocked me. I don't know if I like him.
Well, he muted me for a while as well.
He's the perfect millennial. That's what I've decided.
He really is. That's actually a really good description.
He retreats into his safe space whenever he hears like something he doesn't like. He is 100% the postmodern man in the sense that the condition, as it were, of like hypocritical beliefs never intersect with him. He will believe two absolutely incompatible ideas with total conviction, never realizing.
And then you point out that they're incompatible, and he blocks you.
And right, safe space.
Yeah,
right. I mean, he wrote a book about how there's 79 protons in the center of every Bitcoin. Like that is like the epoch of like millennial postmodern thinking to me.
Right.
And if you try to engage with him at any level on that, it's just impossible. So he's kind of a cartoon.
And he gets all sorts of like historical things wrong. Just tons of them.
Yeah.
And they're funny. They're laughably funny and laughably bad. He skips a lot of history. He misstates it. He simplifies a lot of history. He lacks the nuance that it takes to be a historian in a lot of these areas. And what's funny to me is that if you were here early in Bitcoin, people talked about making Bitcoin the Bitcoin standard early on. The only thing he did is he put a book, put a 50-page book together and gave it to the 50-page book libertarians and got someone to publish it.
Well, yeah, he wore a suit, which goes a long way with a lot of people here. And so it's like this affinity representation of that standard.
And he's credentialed. He's a professor. Exactly. So that seems to go a long way here as well, which, goes against no oracles.
But don't you think maybe what he's doing at least helps sell people of the benefits of Bitcoin in some way?
It makes Bitcoin go up, I'm sure.
I mean, I'm skeptical even of that. The problem is that, like, if you look at people in finance who I thought were way more sympathetic to Bitcoin before and after Safedean, I see a lot less sympathy. Like Isabella took him down, rightly so. And now what? The institutional investors, if they were real, are less inclined to come now because they see it as fantasy land.
I think it further entrenches the Bitcoin believers. Like that's what I saw with it.
Attrition.
I think it was in some ways like a chapter of the Bible. It came out and we had a bunch of, I think there were probably Litecoiners who read it and were like, by golly, I got to get back to Bitcoin. And a bunch of ether heads were like, I fucking just got to get back to Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin standard. I think there were those kinds. And it's just a chapter of a book. It doesn't, of a greater work, the Bitcoin Bible, and it doesn't really have, in my opinion, a lot of merit.
I think it should be said. I think there's a lot of I don't know what it is. I guess it's just oracleization that gets done with the mindset of people who reduce the attrition rate. Like if you were to bring more people in, you will get no thanks. But if you prevent people from leaving, it seems you get like showered with accolades. So like to his credit or not, I don't know. That's how I see him working in like the machine, is he does reduce the attrition rate.
But should we all have a little bit of Bitcoin then?
I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
you should have a little bit of everything.
You'll know in 30 years if you should have. I think
my whole thing now, I'm living like this fully automated luxury communist lifestyle where I own a little bit of everything, and then I just kind of rebalance, and that's that. And like Bitcoin would be very well situated in a world where everybody just added that to their portfolio of things that they manage in that way. I don't know how much risk anyone should have, but like regular incoming, rebalance and work inflow kind of stuff, arriving here would be good for
that
us.
sounds like a pretty simple,
Easy
standard
life.
market is efficient type
Yeah,
existence.
yeah.
Wow.
You've hedged. You've stepped back and hedged.
You have to. I mean, there's a point at which
not
you've
so
got to
much-
like
it's not so
look at
much
your
hedging.
risk, and it's just like
It's the best risk-weighted return. It's
you lose sleep after a point. Like you sit there, you look at these numbers on various things. My whole Bitcoin got to be quite a bit of money at some point, and then like it's like, why are you exposed to like this level of risk in your life when you could just not have any stress?
I think the thing too that happens. I mean, I think Bitcoin's particularly attractive to certain, to men. We've seen that.
Because they're bulls.
Yeah. And they're bulls. And there's a certain thing that happens, I don't know why, in the male mind where you see something shiny and you run towards it and you give every fucking thing up in your life. And so like we would talk about, people showing up at Bitcoin, and we'd like, do you have a girlfriend? He'd like, yeah, I have a girlfriend. We're like, you want in a month? Do you have a job? Yeah, it's going to be 6 months away. You're not going to have a job. And we see this every time someone comes to Bitcoin. They throw their girlfriend into Bitcoin Mountain. They throw their job into Bitcoin Mountain. They throw all sorts of things. And just like being interested in Bitcoin, I want to tell everyone this. This is a PSA. Being interested in Bitcoin isn't a job. I don't know if you know that. That's
true.
It's just
I don't know. I've made it into a job.
You have, but like this, that's not, being interested in Bitcoin isn't your job. Doing this podcast, you've made into a job, right?
Yeah.
You're doing something different, but do you know how many men there are sitting in their basement, like masturbating and looking at the Bitcoin charts and saying like, I'm being productive, And you're like, hey, what are you doing? Like they still live in their mom's house and they might have $12 million. It's a complete accident. They didn't earn it. They didn't do dick. They just bought some Bitcoin on an exchange, sat on it, and they got really lucky,
But isn't it the game theory needed that? The game theory of making Bitcoin grow, we needed to have a lot of rich people early on to go out and evangelize about it.
Oh, you need it even still, I think. This is
I wish
a bag.
Charlie Lee would quit Litecoin. I mean, he quit Litecoin by selling it, but he won't come over here and help us pump in China.
Well, so that's another point. I don't think you can leave Litecoin. I like Charlie a lot. I've spent a lot of time with him. I think he's a Bitcoin maximalist. I don't think he can leave Litecoin because
He's not a Bitcoin man. He can never be one.
well,
He
you know what I
literally
mean.
can't be,
I think internally he is, because I think he can't leave Litecoin. Just imagine,
Well, he's an in-group maximalist. Everyone wants to be an in-group maximalist.
but say
Out-groups are disgusting.
say Charlie comes out and goes, do you know what? Yeah, I was wrong. Got it wrong. Litecoin's bullshit. No one's going to use it. We should all be in Bitcoin. Everyone's going to go, what's right for you? You fucking sold yours.
But instead of that, he's hedged his bets, and he hasn't hedged at all. What does he do? He doubles down. He says, Litecoin is going to go up. I promise. I don't know if he said I promise, but it sure seemed like a promise. And I know a bunch of Litecoiners who are sitting there holding their money and like, well, Charlie said it would go up, just like he said it would go down.
How many people have ever turned around, though, on any of these projects and said, yeah, fuck, I was wrong. Yeah, I was wrong. Don't do
It
this.
has happened, but not very many times.
I can't.
No, because they have two things. They either have a bag or a reputation. Like, if you could be really totally honest.
The wheels are turning here.
I can smell it. Yeah, there's something's burning.
I mean, Vitalik may have come close with like just declaring like the project
The red herring
thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty close. And he tried to leave over the he said Lambos. He was mad about the Lambos and.
Does Larimer get credit when he changes gears, or does he
I don't think
not?
so. I
Because
think
he never
that
like addresses
he
the
just
past.
goes on to the next thing, right?
He doesn't address the past in any capacity. Right?
Larimer, I feel like, is trying to live off of that, like that one time, like Satoshi told him he wasn't good enough, and he's just been trying to prove to Father Satoshi that he is.
Is he working on anything new?
Yeah, EOS I think is his.
EOS.
EOS is
So
his.
he hasn't moved on to one since that.
Steam was his.
Yeah.
BitShare was his.
Yeah.
Other BitShare type products.
He's a blockchain maximalist.
No, he's a whatever makes Dan Larimer's crowd money maximalist.
All right, let's talk about Ethereum, right? Okay, so I struggle to ever listen to anyone when they go, Ethereum is a scam. And by the way, I might have said it myself once or twice just to be
provocative.
Be provocative, see what people say. But I struggle. I see something that was A, and then it was no, A doesn't work as B, and it's kicking the can down the road, and it's moving fees.
That's presuming their market pitch has any bearing on what it actually is.
Exactly, it is what it used. But then I look at something like MakerDAO, right, and I'm like, people are using that. It has a purpose. It solves some kind of use case. Okay, well, if it has a purpose and people are using it, is there something in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's actually some. I mean, I think MakerDAO is kind of cool in terms of what it does, but I think that people seem to fail to realize that it's also centralized. It's not quite what I think they claim to be. I think they have a kill switch.
I mean, I centralize. I'm very I don't know, very unaffected by at this point. I don't see that Bitcoin necessarily achieves.
Well, you're getting to my point about MakerDAO, which is I think there's elements of it that are highly centralized, and the price feed I think is pretty centralized. I think the kill switch is pretty centralized, and I look at that and I think to myself like, oh, you could fucking build that on Bitcoin. All you have to do is have a company stake its trust in some nation and say that we are now MakerDAO. And they could basically build it using, a number of multi-sig type functions and holding, just watching, these price feeds and managing that all themselves.
Something I'll say about Ethereum is that I started seeing people use it to route value in nefarious ways when Bitcoin was flying high and these Banana Republic governments were banning Bitcoin. And at that time, Ethereum immediately took over for Bitcoin on a lot of value transfer operations, which I had heard from people in the Ethereum space was like happening, and then I verified and knew it was true.
I saw the same thing with Dash, weirdly.
Yeah, so there you go.
It was happening like Venezuela.
Is this could be built on Bitcoin a fair argument for anything? Because
say it again.
When people say, "Well, you could build that on Bitcoin," is that a fair argument for things? Because
nobody achieves like a construction project in any significant way. So that was my counterparty thesis was like, okay, we'll just do this with like the network effect and be done with it.
Yeah.
But then you don't make any money because like you are
money seems to be made on fervor more than anything. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be
confidence.
made
on. These are virtue signal games in many ways.
And I think Warren Buffett actually has a whole speech on this from like the 90s or something like that, where he talks about like the early days of airplanes and how people were, investing in airplanes, and the early investors in airplanes didn't really make money because those weren't the winners in the end, right? Those sort of early airplane companies, it was oftentimes the people that would like follow these trends that made a bunch of money, and the companies that they made money on didn't exist 3 years later or 5 years later. And it just seems to me that there's sort of this weird reality in emerging technologies where people make a ton of money just living on fervor, living on people's sort of belief that this is going to go up and that's going to go up. I mean, magicization. It's belief in sort of this understanding of the world is a place where there's just things that are too complicated for me to understand.
There's also no regulation here. So like, how are you ever going to conquer the pitchman who's offering 10x returns by way of the next Bitcoin? There's been like a perpetual problem here. So if you build it with Bitcoin, you're offering X. Meanwhile, this guy's offering 10x because he's going to give you the next Bitcoin. And there's no regulations to examine claims. So like 10x seems to be a preferable investment to most people at this point.
Right. It's difficult for someone to say like that, well, that has some problematic security guarantees. And you're like, yeah, well, but you don't have to look at that. I'm offering 10x.
Well, so that's my thing with Ripple, right? Because I'm thinking,
well, that's your thing with Ripple.
Well, no. So how many people would be that excited about bank settlements if they didn't have a bag of Ripple?
Well, I think it's funny to watch people be excited about bank settlement in the first place. I mean, do you remember when everyone got excited about notarization?
Oh, right, of course.
There's like notarization.
The things we've always believed.
Yeah,
we've always been here for notarization.
I can't believe it. Notary's so hard. I'm like, where did you learn that?
But like, I at least get the Apple fanboys, because look, an Apple phone is
Apple's
cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, the phones are cool. The laptop. Oh, look, my laptop syncs with my phone.
They work.
Cool. It's just, but then people getting excited about international bank settlements like it's the most amazing thing. I'm thinking, no, it's because you've got a bag of Ripple and someone told you it's going to be worth $589.
I think that's partly true, but I think also what happens, you know how like mathematicians get into this sort of world where they get lost in their own head and they just get real stupid, but they're also really genius. I think the same thing kind of happens when you start thinking about money. I think money is a really complicated problem. And when you start getting deep into what money is, how money works, and why we have constructions of finance the way that we have constructions of finance, I think your mind explodes for a little while.
Well, because money is only a thing because of the way humans are.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing. Like Ripple, it might be that they're interested in international bank settlement because they had a bag of Ripple. But then what happened is they actually became very interested in it, and now they're obsessed with the Nostro Vostro accounts, and they don't even know what those really are. And at some point, there's going to be a person who sits and goes, "Oh, like, you know what? I just had this like thought. Maybe the thing that we say that we solve doesn't matter at all." And at that point, that person will exit Ripple and enter Bitcoin and stop being like a Ripple bot on Twitter. And, it's just interesting to me. Like, I think that's the same thing that happened with Bitcoin. Like Bitcoiners did the same thing. We came here, we got so stupid thinking about money, and, it takes, 2 or 3 years to really get on the other side of that, I think.
Yeah, it should be also considered that a lot of people are convincing themselves with their like outbursts. Like we did that in Bitcoin. We were looking for arguments so that, we were, at least in our minds, doing some sort of like, I don't know, like a pilgrimage or something maybe. But like in reality, it might be more accurate to say that we were proving to ourselves in many ways this thing we believed. And then we'd find fights, pick them with people who probably didn't even care that much about what the thesis was. And then we'd announce a victory. So like that happens with the Ripple people as well.
All right, so
and no one really knew whether we won either. That was always what was really funny to me.
Yeah,
it's true. It looked like we won. Yeah.
Back on Ethereum before I close that bit out. So, like, where do you think Ethereum is going to go? Because one thing is
down.
So I read the document about scaling about Ethereum 2.
Yeah.
And I'm not a technical person anyway, so I wouldn't be able to normally judge this stuff. But I did just go, huh? This sounds like fucking
Ethereum pulled a
complicated.
chess move that I did not expect. I thought that Ethereum would not scale, and then it was going to be a lot of problems. And I was right. And I was so right that what they did is they said, we're not scaling. This isn't going to work. Junseth was right. They all declared it. They signed a document. And then they were like, let's put a 2 on the end, get rid of all of the old stuff and just kind of like hit the reset button. And everyone in the Ethereum community was like, we're going along with that. That sounds good to me. And I didn't expect that chess move.
I'm not surprised by it. After the DAO, it became obvious to me that was, the way it was headed. And I don't think that was the wrong decision in hindsight, even. Like, you are investing in the leadership in many ways, or at least the sign. And if you're investing in the Ethereum sign, it is therefore correlated with the rule set makers, and all of the incidentals of the sign don't matter. So I don't see how Ethereum has any scaling issues whatsoever, because they could just hit a button, remove all the crap they don't want, and then keep enough balances around to make people happy and start again.
Like if you look at the way that I think Ethereum goes is I think that it eventually grows and grows and grows and becomes a single instance on an Azure server somewhere, and everyone will be like, we're building this stuff and this is great. Look at this smart contract. You're like, well, Wells Fargo did that in 1990 using MySQL, and they did it with a lot less overhead. And now you're all building this thing on Ethereum. I can see it becoming a stack that people use, but it's not more usable than technology that exists now. And I think that people use it because, you have a bunch of kids right now who are learning to program Ethereum. And then 20 years from now, they're going to still want to program things on Ethereum. So I could see it basically degrading into nothing more than just a software stack.
Well, yeah. I think that the regulations are coming, and that's going to really change the space up significantly. So there may be a time when Ethereum is just rendered irrelevant by way of some weird regulatory structure. We shall see.
Well, it would also depend on whether any of these big partnerships and projects that seem to be announced actually ever exist.
The Ethereum Alliance.
Yeah, like if
178 partnerships.
If somebody actually came out with, it's Ripple, right? All these banks were partnering with every bank in the world. And then you go to the bank and did they partner with you? We are testing it nominally in a small project. We actually don't. It's run by Isaac in accounting. He's giving it a try. And then, it's published. It's like, no, they're not. But the Ripple price is already on 10x. No one seems to be coming out with the finalized version of this stuff. I think EOS just announced a partnership with Land Rover.
No, that's IOTA.
IOTA, that's right.
Yeah,
Land Rover and Jaguar.
Yeah.
And, the announcements are the same as ever. They're a partnership. It's a test, and they're going to see what they can do with this. And it's going to be, it will never happen.
Yeah.
I would almost guarantee it. It won't happen. It might happen. But that would be, in my opinion, the only thing that would really keep one of these projects around for a really long time.
Confidence is the product. So as long as they can generate confidence, it'll stick around. And there's a willing audience here. They want to be confident. So
when does the confidence die though? Because this has been going on for years, right?
Probably when the regulators step in. That's probably in my assessment, what you're investing in right now, and almost anything in the space is some regulatory action. Like that's what it will be manifest. Because if the liquidity, I mean, it seems to me that the internet demands liquidity. People want it for almost any number of reasons. So if that's on tap, it'll get used, and we see that. Whether or not like the world is ready to deal with that is like very questionable, as has been made apparent to me over the last few years. And I suspect the regulators are starting to figure this out.
Next up, I talked to Chris and Junseth about a whole bunch of different subjects. We go on for ages. But before that, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So let's talk about my lead sponsor, Kraken. Without doubt, the single best exchange for buying and selling Bitcoin in the world. They've got over 4 million clients. They've had over $140 billion traded since 2011. They've got listed 20 assets with up to 5x leverage, and they've got 24/7 live support. Ever since I've pretty much started the podcast, I've had support from Jesse, but he's a guy who supports the whole industry, and everything he does is to move the industry forward. And I'm seeing this now working with him, not just because of what Jesse's done and with his help supporting the podcast, but also with the conversations I've had with the various people in the team, like recently with Nick Pacocco, who is the Chief Security Officer, and talking about what's happening with security at Kraken, but also their lead product designer and the demo I got for all the exciting new things they're releasing. I'm so glad to be working with Kraken. Are you using them? Have you checked them out recently? You're definitely going to be checking them out soon with some of the updates that are coming. But if you do want to join me in supporting Kraken, the best crypto exchange in the world, head over to kraken.com, which is kraken.com. That is kraken.com, which is kraken.com. And let's talk about BlockFi again. The future of crypto and financial services. You know how much I love these guys. They've supported everything I've done from pretty much since I started having sponsors. I'm going to meet up with them tomorrow. I'm meeting up with the team. Going to be finding out about all the exciting new products they've got coming, all the exciting new developments. We're going to have a proper catch up, but also like talk about ideas. Is there anything we can do to help you, the listeners, understand more about what they're doing and their products? And if there are, reach out to me. They're always open-minded. And this is why I like working with them. This is why I trust them. This is why I'm happy to have 20% of my Bitcoin in their interest accounts earning interest for me. If you want to find out more about what BlockFi are doing, head over to their website. You can find out about their crypto-backed loans and their interest accounts. That is blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. That's blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. And lastly, let's talk about consensus. This is what I'm here in New York for. I'm here for all the different events that are going on. I'm going to be heading to as many as I can, but I'm really excited about Consensus as well because there's going to be some great speakers. They've got John Carvello, they've got Christian Decker, people who've been on my podcast, Alex Gladstein. There's so many good speakers. So are you here? Are you here for the conference? Do you want a ticket? If you do, you got a discount coming. The team at Consensus got a $300 off a ticket if you're interested. You just need to head over to consensus2019.com. That's consensus with a U, which is CONSENSUS 2019.com. And if you want $300 off your ticket, then use the promo code BitcoinDid300. Hopefully I'm going to see you here. If you are, come and tap me on the shoulder, come and say hello. It'd be great to meet you. So what about Bitcoin Cash? Because you lived through it. It kind of all happened when I first got in, but you lived through it all, the history, all the scaling arguments, the debates. Is it just a scam to you?
I mean,
and I think you're going to have different views. And I think I know what your views are going to be. I think you're going to be more scam. You're going to be like, nah.
Well, I think it's, Here's what I would say about Bitcoin Cash. It conforms to the rules of Bitcoin. It's what we all said we wanted in 2013.
I'm with you on that. 100%.
We all said that we wanted this currency that we could then fork because if we, and there's actually a video of Andreas Antonopoulos who goes up and says like, what's going to happen if the NSA figures out how to, hack Bitcoin? We're going to fork it. And, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's what Roger Ver truly believes he did. He figured out that there was this group who was, fucking with the consensus and, the group model of Bitcoin, and he didn't like it. So he forked it, did exactly what we, Andreas Antonopoulos and others said you should and could do in Bitcoin. And so, I mean, to that end, I'm not as strongly opposed to those sorts of things. I didn't sell my Bitcoin Cash. I think a lot of people would probably be laughing at that, but I was like, you know what? Like, if they're going to play I've always been under the impression that blockchains are war. So if you're going to go to war with my blockchain and give me free tokens on top of it to let that war play out, I mean, I just kind of sat on it and have let it go. And it looks like Bitcoin, the original, is coming out the winner. But I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of that consideration. I would add to it that libertarianism is rooted in governance, not money per se. And so in my mind, looking back at what happened, it had to come to a point because like libertarian theory like does not allow for this group of like hierarchical specialists to dictate terms to like the money using populace, it seems. And that's kind of very evident in the case of Bitcoin. You have this group, it's like unironically named core, which I constantly return to at this point. And like what goes on in there probably is rightly opaque because there's a lot of very difficult concerns they have.
They're the Fed.
Yeah, they are the Fed, exactly.
In some ways.
Right. But that's like not, that's antithetical to the libertarian goals in full. So unfortunately that demographic was lost and there could have been.
They're religionists. I mean, it really is the Catholics versus the Protestants, etc.
Both sides are. The zealotry exists on both sides.
Well, but the point is that there's within like factions, you have factionalists. You have this one like sort of myopic large group that marches forward all together, and then some people are always going to be unhappy with that, and they branch off. And it's obvious to me that when you have people that fraction off of the original group, the chances that they're going to fraction again are very high, which we immediately saw.
It's true, yeah. It's true.
And I guarantee you that there's going to be another fraction or faction of people that split off of one of these two groups. It's going to continue happening there. And that's been kind of my thoughts on those two, is that they're going to sort of just splinter into progressively smaller and smaller groups of people that believe, you're back to this sort of Dash principle, Dash coin being like libertarian money for people that live in Connecticut.
Well, one thing
not Connecticut, Vermont.
Yeah. New Hampshire?
New Hampshire.
There you go. Yeah.
The one where all the libertarians go.
One thing that's kind of sad in all of that too, though, is that it does seem as if Core has now optimized for the crowd that didn't split, which in my assessment means it is optimized more for attrition reduction than it is for like inflow appreciation, something like that.
What do you mean by that?
If you look at the people who are promoted within the Core group who have certain degrees of like social affinity relationships and promotional effects on Twitter, they're generally the sort of preacher types who are ultra conservative, who promote a hodling aesthetic that prevents and discourages exploration of any ideals or mutation and promotes adherence and allegiance.
I think saying that Core promotes them is a little egregious. I don't think that they're promoted. I think that they're just the loudest people.
You can just, well, that's certainly true. I mean, another part of this is that Twitter kind of controls the entirety of the politics in the space. But I would tell you can just graph that out by looking at what the Core contributors like and retweet. And that right there will tell you what the power of that social hierarchy is and what they're promoting.
Maybe.
And like, think about who it is. You're looking at Samson Moe. You're talking about the Asian cowboy. You're talking about Jimmy Song. Thank you. We're talking about
Tone Vase.
But
he's not a.
Oh God, that's another one.
Tone Vase. I like him.
Yeah, they promote like cheerleaders of adherence and allegiance, which I think is kind of sad because we're going to need to change the proof of work at some point, and that's going to destroy the Core community, I suspect.
Why?
We can listen to Luke Dash Jr.'s points on this, but like what is the optimum or the ideal like number of miners, and what is the optimum or ideal mining algorithm? It's not to say the case. It's not to say that any one of them will do. There are some that are better than others. And right now, the nature of like the ASICs have made it so that you effectively need a government license to produce Bitcoin now, or somebody who has access to a government license to produce Bitcoin. I'm skeptical that is an ideal, but and I think Luke Dash Jr. is as well. And there's a lot of like unnecessary friction. Because here's the thing: at the end of the day, the reason that mining exists is to take liability off of the leadership. It's not to say that you really. The old trope was that mining was like this. What made it true?
I think you're misusing leadership. I don't think it's leadership, but I think it's to take the transaction liability off of those who traditionally have done it. I don't think that's false, but I don't think it's to like take it off of Adam Back.
I don't think it intentionally. I think it evolved that way.
I think it certainly does that, but I don't think that that's why it exists, right? I think that.
Well, consider what would happen during SegWit 2x, because it seemed like the whole community was lined behind the Bitcoin Core group and not the miners.
Except that there were a lot of Bitcoin Core developers who were not pro SegWit 2x.
No, but that would be my point. I think that if tasked between a choice.
Sorry, I mean SegWit. I'm thinking SegWit itself, like the USAF.
Yeah. That was a weird thing that doesn't fit into anything at the moment. But
SegWit 2x is very complicated.
Well, but it became evident to me, especially in hindsight, that like if the core group is aptly named, because if they dictate the ticker symbol to be one thing, the exchanges seem like they're going to follow, as well as the hodlers. Whereas if the miners declared it, I don't think that it would have the same level of support.
I don't think anyone declared that. I think that was something that grew up organically. I think that exchanges labeled it themselves, and it was in a world where there was just Bitcoin.
Well, what happened?
That mattered.
What happens if the leader of Bitcoin Core goes left and the rest of them go right?
Then he'll go left and they'll go right. I mean, I think
who will get the ticker symbol?
That's a good question. I think that the exchanges will probably decide that.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that it's interesting or like problematic to say that Bitcoin has various factions and those factions have various leaders and interests. I don't think that's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the entirety of the pitch at this point. That's what I think.
Could be. I don't think so though.
We'll see. I don't know. It's a little bit embarrassing for a lot of people in the space. Because if in fact leadership is as important as it is,
that's the same. I think that's the same mistake that Peter was making with Ethereum. I think that essentially sort of allows for the marketing of the people that are following Bitcoin, the libertarian sort of marketing to you consider that valid. And I don't find that to be valid or compelling or interesting. I think it's just something that libertarians come here and say that we don't want a leader. And, you point out that, well, there's a leader over there and one over there. I don't think that that's that compelling or interesting. I think that they're just stupid.
Well, yeah, but they're also the majority of the
I don't
rhetoric.
think they are.
That's what I see on Twitter. Now, whether or not that's or on Bitcoin, our Bitcoin for sure.
Our Bitcoin 100%, but that's why nobody goes there.
That's not what I see. I mean, we can have a conversation how many real people are in this space, which is always like a big question to me. Because you look at the number of comments and then you look at the number of upvotes and the numbers involved in the order of magnitude.
I'm with you there. I always hear people talking about crypto Twitter and they're like, they tell me it's huge, but I'm like, how big is it? And they're like 120,000. I'm like, it's got to be like 4,000 big.
Well, that's why I think it's a bit weirder for me coming in a bit later, because I've not been afraid to kind of go down the middle sometimes. I'll talk to this guy, I'll talk to that guy. And I feel like you
ever talked to a black gay prostitute?
No.
Because we did.
Right.
You should do that.
Okay. One step at a time. But and I've talked to Chris about this sometimes. And the thing is like, I feel like sometimes when I'm kind of not towing the line so much, I'm getting the result of years of arguing and resentment and anger.
You are.
Thrown at me for what is a conversation I'm going to have.
And no one can explain it. What's that experiment with the monkeys where they put them in and they shock the monkey if he touches the banana, and then they shock the monkey if he touches the banana, and then they take the monkey out, and then they put a new monkey in and they shock the monkey if he touches the banana, they take one out, and eventually the cycle perpetuates where they start the monkeys start beating up other monkeys to prevent them from getting shocked. Then they take the shock out, and then they just have important study. They have monkeys beating up each other no matter what every time they go to touch a banana, and no one can explain why. And that's the thing with you. Like, you come here, you're entering like a world of resentment and pain and hurt, and you point at something and everyone's like, you can't go there, and you're like, why? And they're like, I don't know. And it's just the way it is.
So let me talk about the Ryzen thing.
There are reasons, by the way.
Like, as time goes on, I think I'm going to be more and more happy that I did the Ryzen interview, not because of the interview itself, because what I learned about doing the interview, right? So
I thought that was a great interview, by the way. I thought it was phenomenal.
So what's really interesting is that some really hardcore maximalists have come in and said, that interview was terrible, you didn't hold into account on things, you let him get away with stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then I've had people who are well-known in the space who privately have come to me and said, you did a great job here. By the way, you could have done this bit better, and kind of guided me. But let me just tell you what was really interesting about this, and where I got confused, but I'm happy about my podcast, is that I've always tried to represent the people who've got no fucking idea or understand this stuff, because it's really complicated, right? I got myself into a place where everyone was angry with me.
Yeah.
So I agreed to do the interview. You're an idiot for doing it from one side. I stopped doing the interview. You're an idiot for doing it from one side. By the time the interview went live, there were on our Bitcoin, there were people saying I did a really fucking terrible job and I'm giving a platform to a scammer. And then there were people on RBTC going mad at me saying, you did a really terrible job in this interview because you're perpetuating the Blockstream narrative because of blah, blah, blah. And so you suddenly get into, I was saying to this guy, I just sort of read it, I was like, look, just try and understand from my point of view what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand different narratives and different conversations. If I speak to this guy, everyone says, you're an idiot, you're a scammer. If I speak to this guy, the other side say, you're an idiot, you're a scammer. How the fuck do you navigate all this? And how is someone new coming in meant to navigate this?
Well, I would suggest you have to decide if you're a journalist or if you're a promoter, because you did a bad job promoting Bitcoin, and that is a valid complaint if you're a promoter by letting any degree of doubt enter. I mean, this is asinine to me, but like that's what I see in people. And if you're a journalist, then you need to explore the territory regardless of what you find. This talk of the narrative, it's just I've gotten maybe a bit I don't know past it maybe, but like what do you see? Like I understand what narratives are, but observations are so powerful and useful. Like that's where I think the meat should be for anybody who's doing actual journalism. Now, whether or not anybody wants that in this space is very arguable.
Well, what I see is people making binary arguments about things that definitely aren't binary and have got a lot of nuances to them.
Sure. And I mean, yeah, I think
these are men of faith.
I think people have forgotten why these arguments matter or don't matter. Back in the day, it was ridiculous. We thought it was ridiculous when a new blockchain would come out and it would be Bitcoin, but with 5-minute block times, or Bitcoin with 2-minute block times. And we would laugh at those people and we'd call them scammers, and I would stand by that. But at the same time, like, although I guess, those reasons have been forgotten. So like, if you go look in those corners, I think people will be mad at you. They'll be angry at you, but they won't remember the reasons why those things were problematic, at least at their start.
Let me tell you one that really stood out to me, one comment. It came through as a conversation on a DM, and I won't name them, but they said to me, you're given a platform to a scam. I'm going to paraphrase it. I can't remember the exact words, but it was like, you're given a platform to a scammer and you're affecting the financial future of my children.
I was like, such...
Well, I was like
thin skin.
Yeah, but I'm like,
God, the cowards and neurotics.
I can't believe that. Like,
this is Fat Tail. This is what happens.
I'm watching it like we watch this like globally right now with this movement of people who are refusing to this notion of deplatforming. I mean, I hadn't heard that word until 2017, and it's insane to me. Like, you can give anyone you want a platform. You're not affecting anyone's children's future. It's insane, and I think that like I'm sad that that's leaking into Bitcoin.
I would suggest you actually have a trigger warning. It pains me to say that, but I used to think trigger warnings were something that, like, I guess I don't know how to explain it, what I thought it was, but what's very evident to me is that if you put this disclaimer at the start of the show, you are now indemnified from whatever happens.
Everything afterwards.
Yeah, and you can
tell George Carlin jokes.
Yeah, right.
I've already thought of the disclaimer for this show. I've already been doing it. When I was thinking, and also it's not just disclaimers. Sometimes I'm thinking, shit, how am I going to word this in a way that's not going to get people shouting at me? Like, if I want to say...
Number go up, man. That's your rule.
Well, no. So if I want to say, I fundamentally believe Roger Ver thinks Bitcoin should be peer-to-peer electronic cash. Yeah. And he's not doing Bitcoin Cash to scam people. He's doing it because he fundamentally believes that. Because I think he does. I'm an idiot. I'm a scammer. Okay. And I'm thinking, but
we're sorry for whatever we did to contribute to that sort of.
But it's just an opinion. I've met the guy. I don't like what he's done with Bitcoin.com. I assume he owns that Bitcoin, even though he denies it. I think he lies. I think he causes a lot of problems. I think calling Bitcoin Core, personally, I think it's a bit disingenuous. Blah, blah. There's a lot of bullshit there. But I don't think he forked Bitcoin to make a lot more money. I do think it was an attack on Bitcoin. I stand by that. But I think he fundamentally believes that Bitcoin should be peer-to-peer cash, because if you look at the history, he believed in a white paper that said it was that, and then he spent a lot of time trying to get retailers to adopt it. That's all he did. So his background supports the fact that he believes in that.
He also has a perspective that these people don't have, which is that the retailers didn't adopt because of X, Y, and Z reasons. And like, we can argue about how accurate that is, but it doesn't matter, because he was somebody who had the ability to see things in a way that the masses did not. I mean, this is one of the many reasons anarchy, I think, is retarded to me at this point. But you have people that are specialized in this part of the process. They should have an outsized power relating to that part of the process, at least in terms of defining the observation. But in this space, people don't want that to be seen, so they label him the deviant. And rather than absorb that efficiency into the system, they cast out the observer. It's like very classic, religious story.
But the point being is, like, a lot of people have said to me, Pete, you're a journalist now. You need to be responsible for your content. I was always like, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm a podcaster who fell into this. And okay, well, if I am a journalist, then I want to freely express my thoughts. Even if it's wrong, challenge me, cool. But then I'm worried about freely expressing my thoughts as a potential journalist because I think I'm going to get attacked. People are going to reach out to my sponsors and say, stop sponsoring him.
They're
going
babies.
Yeah, so it's this really minefield to try and navigate. It is an actual minefield.
I kind of envy you, actually,
Okay.
in the sense that, like, I was there once in many ways. And the excitement and the journey that you are going to go through as a result of this is just such a wonderful, fabulous journey. And the way you saw the world before dealing with thousands and thousands of people will never be the same now after you go through this transformation. And like some of these things, I can give you my answers, things that I really strongly suspect are true. And then some of these things are just mysteries. And I would hope maybe you would come to me with some of these solutions.
Well, I come to you now a lot more. So I didn't understand you at first. At first, I was like, we had that. There was always that other. You had that little fanboy who was always supporting you. You had like a white rose thing.
Oh yeah,
But,
White Rose. I like him.
Yeah, but like, so at first I didn't understand you. I was like, who's this guy? I can't understand what he's saying. It's all kind of like Shakespeareanly written and blah blah blah. And now I think over time, I think I get it because I think I feel myself.
That makes you an idiot.
Well, I feel I feel myself starting to share some of your opinions or start to see the way you've operated or the contrarian views you take because I find myself doing it and it starts to make more sense. And I think what happens is you go in, you get beaten up so much. You have two choices. You give up. No, you've got three choices. You give up, you pick a side, or you challenge everyone. They're your three
this is
choices.
great. This is beautiful.
False
Yeah.
I like
dichotomy.
this. No, I like it.
Because like I nearly went full Bitcoin maximalist and I just felt lost.
You should consider that people don't evaluate content. Like 90% of people don't. They evaluate the affinity, like the source of the content, and then the tone of the content. And then they form a conclusion based on those components. So like what I generally do is
Tone in particular.
people are slaves to tone. They're conditioned to it as a matter of birth.
I would have believed you, but you said it meanly.
Well, that's so a lot of the way that I frame things is in an amoral frame. Like I try very hard at least to consider like what morality does this have in this way, and then I remove it. And like that seems to at least alienate people whose opinion I don't care about, and then often make the same point. That's been my solution. It's not necessarily the way everyone should go, but that's how I ended up there.
But do you understand those three choices?
Oh yeah, I think that there's those three choices. I absolutely do.
And you picked option 3.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It beats you around a bit though, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
And then people call you a fucking snowflake.
Oh yeah. I mean, being a centrist is like the hardest thing in the world, and I don't think that I achieved that, but I at least like try to at some level. And like what being a centrist means, you have no allies effectively. Like that's why we have polarization in like varying demographics. So like I don't know what the right answer is for you.
I think I think I'm right of center then, because I'm definitely more conservative, definitely more Bitcoin, but I try and operate my work allowing myself to go to the other side and just see what they've got to say or see what's there for a whole variety of reasons. There's no financial benefit for doing it. There's no emotional or psychological benefit for doing it. It's a much harder thing to do, but it's intellectually stimulating.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's why you're doing this though.
You are going to become anti-fragile too. So like no matter what happens at the end of this, you're going to find yourself in rooms so much better prepared than like 99.999% of the population. Like I go to these like some things every now and like I went to City Hall for something they were doing, and just like watching how like normies, like there's like this, I don't know if you can make it in blockchain, you can make it in anywhere kind of thing. It's just like the degree of like hardening that like the average citizen has compared to the degree of like Bitcoin pundit is a gigantic chasm. So like if you want to do any number of things in the public after this, assuming you don't stay here forever, you will benefit from a lot of what you see in this respect.
Yeah, possibly. And I think also I came into Bitcoin as a socialist. And
Did you really?
Did you?
Wow.
Pretty much, yeah, because I didn't understand the economics of it. Like I came in thinking we've got the NHS in the UK. This is brilliant. Everyone gets free healthcare. And God, they've got rid of free higher education, university. That was terrible. It was great that we got free education. And then I came into Bitcoin and got exposed to things I wasn't aware of before, that like socialism is, one step from communism and is fundamentally evil. And also, if you want free education, why the fuck should I pay for it? And some of those things started to come through. Now, I'm not full conservative, but I've become more conservative because of it. And I think in becoming more conservative, you become hardened.
Well, I mean, what's interesting politically, like, because it sounds like we're kind of taking that that road. I came into the space trying to be apolitical, and I tend to be a fairly apolitical person. And in recent years, I mean, the only thing that I've ever cared about is in terms of like American governance is this notion of the freedom of speech. And I think in the last couple of years, like that aspect, I care a lot about. I talk about it a lot on my show, and like it does, like that's really, like, for me, I think that has ended up putting me in this camp where people think that I'm like right of center as well. But you know, I find politics to be very interesting because all of us came with like these weird perspectives. You was socialist, me an anarchist. I think Chris was apathetic. Didn't give a fuck. What's your Chris's method for voting is who's had the most DUIs. He researches. So you know, like I think Bitcoin, like looking at money a lot, really makes you kind of really re-examine sort of all aspects of what it is that you came here to do, and you know, just your core beliefs generally, if you're humble about it.
Yeah, I think I'm humble.
Might be.
I think you're doing fantastic.
You're doing fine.
I love what I've seen so far from you. Absolutely. Whether or not it's humble, I don't know, but I think it's humble.
I'm winging it for sure because I'm a fucking idiot. I don't get a lot of this stuff. Like,
you're learning.
But I'm never going to get some of this stuff. When you guys talk about consensus and when you go into detail, I don't get it. I just fundamentally don't get it. And I've always admitted that, but I don't have a problem with that because people who want hyper-Bitcoinization, they need to understand most people are probably more like me than them.
Well, document your journey too. Like take them with you into the mystery.
You will get things that you don't know that you'll get. Like, you know, a year from now, you'll be way farther on than you are today. It's kind of amazing to me how much I know about Bitcoin's consensus algorithm and Bitcoin's consensus mechanisms and, you know, hashing and all this other stuff that I never gave two shits about, just because I've kind of sat here and through osmosis picked a lot of it up.
Well, so that what makes me laugh. Like, there was another guy today on Twitter giving me shit, another Maximus going, yeah, I've stopped listening to his show because of like XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, when you first bought into my show, I didn't know fuck all. And I admitted it now. I definitely know a lot more. I'm definitely more Bitcoin, yet now you've got a problem. Or is it because the show has grown in notoriety and other people are going mad at me? You've got to go to your faction.
Well, you're accepted into his tribe, first of all, and then now he wants to. You know, you aren't sufficiently conforming enough, I think, is.
Well, people sense power too, like in the sense that like you appear with some degree of regularity, and then to the degree that your appearing is increasing, your power is increasing
in some ways.
And then I think what happens is they either fear the power that you're exerting just by declaring from your affinity these things that are truths or close to it, or they want to abuse your power to get you to promote messages that are, you know, conducive to their financial situation.
It's also just easy to enjoy a fuckwit.
Well, that power thing is interesting because it's not something I want or ever have thought about at all. But what I've noticed is there is privately people trying to manipulate me quite a bit.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That. I remember those meetings.
Oh, boy.
Power is
idea.
commensurate to the size of your audience. I mean, like, this is the thing. I talk to a lot of people who are doing other kinds of content making, whether it's food blogging or just anything. And I don't think that they realize that the power that they have is commensurate with the size of their audience. If they have an audience of 4 million people, they might be talking about buttering muffins. But that's a lot of power that they have. And that's what's going on with you. You actually don't realize how much influence that you have when you have, all of Bitcoin's audience. Everybody listens to your show. And that is a lot of power. It's a weird kind of power.
Put in the hands of an idiot.
That all power is. It's put in the hands by
the way,
the
free speech thing gets very muddled around here. Like I am very much for free speech, but you have people who clearly end up with outsized power over like the beliefs of people, and then it gets very murky from there how things transgress. Well, there's no answers that I even promote here, but I recognize that the difficulties are around this. So
that reminded me of something I meant to ask you about and get your opinions on. The whole Bitcoin versus RBTC, Bitcoin is censored.
That's the narrative.
BTC opens up is free speech, right? So I've looked at this. I've tried to look at this, and I've tried to look both sides. I look at Bitcoin; they're saying it's censored, and certainly think some things are. And I saw something. There was one comment about my interview with Peter Risen that was like, it was a great interview, and that got removed. And I was like, okay, very interesting. That's very interesting. That is clear censorship. But and Roger complains about it, and they all complain about censorship on there. But then I was like, well, if they don't censor that stuff, that whole our Bitcoin will just be a mess, a toxic mess of argument, and it won't achieve anything.
Well, what's funny about our Bitcoin is that it became a toxic mess of doo-doo with censorship, and it was a toxic mess of doo-doo without it. So, like,
but is it even censorship, or is it moderation? If you want to discuss that, go there. Let's keep them
censorship
separate.
Is moderation to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just the case.
Yeah. That's the right way to do it, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think that it's a difficult thing because, like, our Bitcoin, I think that the claim was that our Bitcoin is where everyone is getting their information. And all that happened is it just moved over to Twitter.
So what happens, I've come to realize as a result of like censorship policies, is that as soon as one person starts censoring, it becomes a cascade effect, because the people who are removed from the first discussion end up going to the second discussion, taking out their antagonism there to an amplified degree. They then create more discontent with nearby neighbors. And before you know it, you have these bands of like malcontents that go around the internet who are united in their identity that is this thing that they're not allowed to talk about. Yeah. I mean, this is what I saw with anti-Semitism even, is like now you have, as soon as you like have any like anti-Semitic things come in, you find all of a sudden that like throngs of people will rush in because now they have a venue to like talk finally. And like now it's this weird problem. True. Yeah.
What about the blacks? Welcome. It is a big issue.
I think a lot of it just stems from like the first person to censor in many ways. Like as soon as you have a big site do it, now it becomes this entrenched like belief for somebody.
That's true, and that becomes a safe space to say anything.
Right.
So what do you believe? Should we have censorship? Is it warranted in certain cases?
I think it depends on where it comes from.
It's also difficult because like you have effectively public utilities that are being run like companies. So like if you had a healthy marketplace for a lot of these types of discussions, then it would be a more easy thing to say like, okay, well, this person here doesn't take it, but this one will. And so like, it's not really censorship. But when you have a single company controlling the entire,
it's Facebook or nothing.
Yeah. Now it gets really complicated because the easy.
And by the way, that was the argument with our Bitcoin, is that was the only place you could get have your voice heard.
Which I don't think was true.
It wasn't true. Yeah, it was obviously not true because you could just move to Twitter or you could move anywhere else.
Or just RBTC, which is what happened.
Sure. Yeah, you could make your own Reddit subreddit. I think that's absolutely correct. I think that these are effectively utilities. They lose money almost constantly every year, and we just saw $80 million with YouTube. YouTube losses on Google. Google saying that YouTube was contributing to $80 million less.
It'll probably happen on Amazon too. Like
I wouldn't be surprised.
Where they're going to have some weird thing they're going to have to deal with, and then it's going to end up causing untold damage to some weird industry. And then we'll see it happen there. I have no doubt. I mean, this sort of like first mover advantage thing or whatever it is that causes these like mega companies now. Maybe bad regulations.
I think the government's really like finding it difficult. I mean, I think it all stems, or a lot of it stems from Netscape in the 90s going public before they had any profits. That was really unheard of. And ever since then, that's been the modus operandi for companies. They go public before they have profits. And what do? They do a burn rate. They do basically what a startup would do, and they do it for 20 years because they have $85 trillion. And they can get away with it. So it used to be that those kinds of companies couldn't survive, but now they do. And so what you have is these companies that have established themselves as oligopolies or monopolies and can essentially deperson people.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind because it's you have this sort of you can't
without due process or
you can't unsee it. Right? Because like there's a world in which none of us had social media, and I was content having the voice where I could yell out my window and my neighbors would hear me. And that was a perfectly fine world. And then someone opened up my eyes like the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And all of a sudden I realized that I could have a voice that the whole world could see. And like, you can't undo that. You can't unsee that.
Has that made us like the world a better place or worse?
Everything moves towards the better.
Yeah. And therefore, like, because I watched the Joe Rogan interview, the second one with Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of sympathy for trying to moderate billions of tweets every day. But at the same time, it does certainly feel like there is a liberal bias, which is censoring conservative opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten to calling it the technological genocide at this point. I just don't think that there's two words about it. They don't give a fuck. And it's completely unmitigated. They're not hiding it.
Well, they have like the same kind of like Bitcoin core issue as well. I think that they don't know what the right thing to do is. Like the laws used to, I think, provide resolutions to a lot of these problems, and now we deregulated so many things that I suspect people are just finding these.
We have the conservatives asking for regulation now, and the liberals saying, well, they're just a company. It's weird to watch arguments flip like that, at least in American politics. I don't know how they work in Britain.
Well, we have hate speech laws in the UK.
Yeah, that blows my mind too.
Well, that's why Craig Wright's suing me in the UK, right?
Is he actually, what is the progress on that? We'll interview you now.
I'll show you the documents after this.
Has he filed a complaint in court?
You want to see it?
Yes.
I think he's just going to walk. He's just going to walk away. Is my strong suspicion.
I think he wants a court to say that he's definitely Satoshi.
I don't think he's going to walk away. What the? I got it in here.
That's what he's doing here in Florida. I mean, we have a history with this guy here.
Yeah, the Kleiman one's interesting because I think a lot of people don't remember that episode. By the way, like us going to go look at Kleiman. That was a weird day.
That was Mike in Space told me that's the one to check.
Oh yeah. Do you remember that? That was a weird fucking day.
That was a weird day. I mean, the whole thing is weird. I don't think we ever got a good answer as to what happened to his actual murder.
We found out
poisoned.
Or not, right?
So I didn't get to that bit. So Mike said, listen to this episode, but I really wanted to listen to the Perry Am one first, which I did.
Sorry.
And then it was good. And it was really interesting listening to the way you teed her up. And it was a real masterclass in getting to the point.
Sorry.
In that it was great. It was great. It was blockchain bullshit. So then I listened to the Kleiman one, and Mike was like, look, you're just going to have to jump through a bunch of stuff before you get to it. But I really enjoyed this whole kind of like hour and a half in the car. So I never actually got to the bit where you were like talking about the gates and in the gates. I never actually got to the meat of it. And I find the whole Kleiman thing fascinating because it's either absolutely nothing or maybe he created Bitcoin.
Well, we find it fascinating too because it's in Florida. It's a great Florida story.
All the old Bitcoiners, their stories are fascinating. The class of 2010 and below is just one story after the next.
There's no question that something happened there. And, I have weird, I mean, the whole who is Satoshi thing, I think in some ways is a little bit uninteresting in itself as a question. But the desire to claim the mantle of Satoshi, that is a study in like psychology that is, in my mind, very interesting. People showing up and wanting to be that, and then you have
the Messiah. That happens, I think, in all
Dorian
religions.
Nakamoto, who is crowned. Like we used to joke about it as like you have a new Satoshi Nakamoto every few years, but Dorian Nakamoto shows up, he's crowned, and like he didn't want that. It was the opposite.
Someone just turned up on his doorstep, wasn't it?
Someone turned up and said that he's Satoshi.
Was it the Washington Post?
Yeah,
a Time.
That's the thing. He didn't ask for it. I think that makes the entire difference. That's that he's like a patron saint now. It was bestowed upon him.
He's now painted. Just some random guy who likes choo-choo trains.
So I'm going to listen to the rest of that one again in the car. But what am I missing? What did you guys find out? Because I've heard things about that maybe it was poisoned.
Where the thing stalled out for us, if I remember, maybe you remember better, was the big mystery was why there was a bullet hole in the bed.
In the mattress.
Yeah, and his gun wasn't fired.
And the story was that his girlfriend found him.
Yes.
Which we found out wasn't true.
Yes.
It wasn't his girlfriend.
This is proper investigative journalism.
We showed up. We did everything. We showed up everywhere. We violated a lot of laws, I'm sure.
Yeah. The leads basically went dead at the time. They may be resuscitated now. I think that the reporting police officer on the scene would probably have the most information right now. And I don't know what happened to that person.
And we did everything. We called his business partner and talked to him. We showed up we showed up at the girlfriend's house.
Yeah.
Met her with her husband or whatever.
Yeah. Sounds like a serial investigation.
It was. We were creepy. Like it wasn't good. So like we were, we asked around to try to figure out where she was. We found out where she was. We got to her house and we sat there waiting for a little bit because they had a car in their driveway. We knocked, they didn't answer. And as we were leaving, they pulled up and we asked if we could ask her a few questions. And we did. And, her story is very different than what was in the press. It was that she knew him. He helped her with her computer, but that they weren't ever romantically involved, which is very different than like what the press had reported. And, we were just having fun. We showed up for a day. We did this thing. And then we went and ate the steakhouse. What's your Outback? Outback
right,
steak. Yeah.
So what do you think went on there?
I think a really sick man who was a paraplegic died of sepsis or something like that, which happens. I think he was a Florida man, consummate Florida man. He shoots guns in the house. So I don't think that there's anything really strange about that. I think we both know a lot of those Florida men.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think, which I think is ironic. I think that anyone outside of Florida doesn't know about that man. Doesn't know about the man who shoots guns. I got
a neighbor whose bullet went off the other night at 3:00 in the morning. Yeah. He was cleaning his gun. That was his answer.
And it wasn't Craig Wright.
Well, so do you know what I find interesting about that? Because I've been through all the court documents.
Yeah.
And there might be a legal case here where they're arguing about a bunch of Bitcoin wallets that don't exist. Like Craig Wright, they think Craig Wright's got them, be, and Craig Wright might not have them.
Well, Ira Kleiman, I think, doesn't know.
No,
and that's the thing. I think that I think that nobody really knows what the case is. Yeah, and like if it's not lost, then maybe Craig knows where it is. Maybe he does have these coins.
He has to give the addresses now.
Well, he does, but it's a convenient little thing where he can't move them because it's in a trust until. Everything it's sort of set up very conveniently for him. I mean, we saw. I mean, I remember when we thought something was up. We were at this when we crashed the Satoshi Roundtable, and
is this dressed as Mexicans?
Yes, we had to dress up.
Chinese miners.
Chinese miners. We were dressed up. We had to hide so that they wouldn't recognize us as we were getting into the club. And
how was Bruce about that?
Oh, Bruce was livid.
At the time, he was not happy.
He was.
Was John Carvalho with you, or was that a separate one?
No, John Carvalho was with us.
Yeah.
He was.
He was absolutely with us.
Yeah, because I heard John did. I didn't realize this is the same incident.
Yeah, it was the same one. He called us and we needed a cameraman, so he decided to come. Yeah. And Bruce was not happy about that one. Those are some of the best content. Yeah, we actually bought a membership to the club beforehand, and showed up there, but. We were doing interviews with everybody, and there was the alpaca socks guy who was there, who's an old Bitcoiner. We knew that, and he sat down to the first interview before Bruce realized that we had crashed his party.
That was how we met the weird man-child servant.
Exactly.
Yes.
And there was this really strange person who they wouldn't tell us who it was.
Was it Brock Pierce?
No, it was like it was Tom Cruise. No, it was like a little man. We didn't know if it was a man or a woman.
Yes,
it was definitely an Asian.
Yeah, it might have been the homunculus.
It could have been. Had an unremarkable penis. We don't know. It was a man or a woman. It was Asian, and it wouldn't talk to us, and it was very smug.
We found it after the fact. It was
what happened is we find out that there's this mysterious person who holds the keys to the trust. And I Googled the name, and I was like, Chris, I think that's the person that was at Satoshi. Well, no, before I Googled him, I said, I'll bet you that's the person at Satoshi Roundtable. And then we Googled the person, and sure enough, it was the person at that year's Satoshi Roundtable.
What has the keys to the Craig Wright Trust?
Apparently, the one that they've been, the one who's in, I think, all the emails that he keeps submitting to that case.
Right.
I think that is the person, and she wouldn't be on camera, or he. I still don't know. The homunculus wouldn't be on camera.
But the trust opens 2020, right?
So we hear.
Okay.
I mean, it would be ironic that they're doing all this litigation and paying for litigation for something that he doesn't have access to or any money in.
What do you make of him? What do you think's going on here?
I think there's a classic Australian scammer kind of person that he really does conform with. I'm trying to think of. Who is Hadish or something? There's a. Well, I think
you moved to Australia to do scams. So
right,
who's the one that James Randi caught with the healing people? He moved to Australia selling water there.
Right. Something about Australia produces a very Florida man-esque kind of scammer.
The toxic animals.
You know the history, right? They're all our criminals.
Yes. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We exported
them in Donald Trump. Just kidding, guys.
So, but what do you think? So, do you think he's just a typical con man?
What happens with these conman types is they don't seem to have a lot of empathy for the outcome of their actions.
Well, that's because their brain doesn't have empathy because it doesn't
that's
develop.
That's the theory. I mean, it could be trauma or any number of things.
Not hugged by their mum as a baby.
Well, the whole thing is very strange. I mean, he's talking now about providing proof based on a receipt. But he could have just provided proof based on a signature, which he said he would do and then didn't. And then, it's the whole thing is very, very strange. And at this point, let's say it was him, Kleiman, and who's the other one that's saying that they were part of the group? Phil Bradford or whatever his name is.
No, Phil Wilson.
Who knows?
I think so. Cares? Yeah.
I mean, at that point, my question is, an individual isn't Satoshi then. It's an organization of people. Who contributed what? It's a really difficult question. Who made what comments? Who said what? If it was just him, that's a different thing. But I look at his inability or unwillingness to provide evidence until he then goes and sends people these letters. And I find that to be really problematic in the entire claim.
What I kind of think is happening is this guy had run a couple of scams already. It was evident that this was his lifestyle. So he didn't really have a lot to lose by like just hopping onto the next scam. And it seems like he saw a lot of like willing people here in Bitcoin blockchain, which is the case. Like if you sit down and you start reading through like psychology books, sociology books, etc., like you start to realize how people are wired, and it's really not that hard to control outcomes. I talk about this stuff even. You have to do it with responsibility if you're like going to be well received by society. But if you don't care about that, like
that's true.
The keys are just handed to you. Like we even talked about tone earlier. Like the way you talk to children, your tone is in such a way that is almost guaranteed to produce the outcome you want. And like adults are not that much different, especially when they're motivated by greed, when they like completely suspend their critical thinking. And so I think just
looking for a man in the suit at that point.
Yeah.
Who like says nice things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he saw the opportunity here and he put his foot in the water. And once you start to get people invested, you would think that they would be more skeptical, but that's not what happens. As we've seen with like so many of these like scams, they instead become more willing because like the tragedy that would befall them if you weren't a nice guy is greater than like the risk of continuing onwards.
Trigger warning: all of these are Peter's opinions.
So yeah, so I think he's pretty educated. I think he's pretty smart. I think he knows a lot of things fairly well, especially how to like control people. And so I think my guess is that he had some kind of a relationship probably with Kleiman that was unhealthy. He probably gave him some degree of lip service, recognizing that he was a talent source. It bloomed into some degree of Bitcoin, who knows how much. And then I think he probably mismanaged that Bitcoin or sold it or who knows what, but saw enough access in the space to where he could just pretend to be Satoshi without refrain. And like the truth is that like if it didn't work, he would have lost nothing. And the other part of it too is that people in this space, they love the heel, which is its own thing. Like in WWF wrestling, you have the concept of the heel. So like it was this, he definitely gets credit for innovating on that front because he figured out that there was like a psychological
There was a need in Bitcoin for a heel.
Exactly, right.
It's very true though. There was a need for a heel in Bitcoin.
What's the heel in wrestling?
Well, the heel is the person that nobody likes, but everybody likes.
They like to not like him. Right.
He's a dick.
Yeah.
So you have the guy that everybody wants to win, and then occasionally like you have the heel who comes out and he's like insulting the audience. He's the evil one.
Not all cultures have this either. Like the UK, I don't think has this, but like in America, like Mexico, a few other, like Japan, I think.
Having been to a back when I was a kid, a WCW contest. Also, they tell you when to boo and when to scream and yell. And they would have the heel. He would come out and you'd boo him, and then
who was the heel in WWF like? From when I was young, because we used to get it. Oh, man. I'm like Undertaker.
Was it Sting? Undertaker? I don't know. Like
they're usually arrogant, which is like a very common theme, even with Craig Wright.
You know it when you watch it, but yeah, it's
isn't Vince McMahon the heel? Like, or wasn't he in many times?
No, Vince McMahon's the owner. I think.
But was he like the bad, like the
I think occasionally, but I think like generally they have like a heel, like it's the person that everybody loves to hate. Or, not a heel, but like multiple heels. And like
it's like the baddie in the theater, right?
That's exactly what it is.
And
you know who it is? Because you just watch the crowd. They'll boo him and they'll praise the other guy.
Do you know what I don't understand though, right? Like, so I look at someone like Roger, who's done a whole bunch of stuff that people don't like, but I can just see how some people have sided with him, right? And I look at Craig Wright and I just look at this mountain of things he's done. Like a mountain
all the degrees he's gotten.
All the degrees, all the obvious lies proven over again and again. And there are people still defending him. And I'm thinking, what's he going to take to convince you this guy has nefarious intentions?
There's no amount of evidence. Well, that's what the meaning is too for them. It's no different than flat Earth. Like the reason you believe in flat Earth isn't because you've been like seduced by the the education and the academia. It's because there's meaning there. Meaning generally lies in the ignorance. I think that's part of like the human design.
There's now a community of people who are Craig Wright, maximalists, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's a community who aren't. And if you're a Craig Wright maximalist, it takes the same amount of momentum to move you out of that as like it does to pull you out of like flat Earth or like some cult.
Yeah, it's very cult-like. Yeah. People like to subordinate themselves. It's a very biologically wired thing. You see it all the time in life. If you really are like honest in your assessment, you'll be like, oh, that guy's clearly like ascribing his autonomy to this agency.
All right, listen, I'm just going to switch gears a sec because I want to go back and talk about your podcast a bit. So like, when did you start it?
2015, 2016, one of those 2 years.
Something like that, 15, I'm going to say.
Would you say the space now is different or it's almost exactly the same?
I think you think it's different.
I think it's completely different.
I think it's a lot of the same.
Okay, let's hear both views and
sure.
Go with Go with the same.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the schemes and the scams and the projects today are sort of, they're bigger, they're different, but like a lot of the stuff is repetition of stuff that we've seen previously. It's just a bigger audience as often. So I see the ICO thing. I mean, we saw that, like I was saying earlier, MPEX, other little, stock markets that existed. I think that Mastercoin and Ethereum both had, their own token sales. I think a lot of this stuff is just, it's just reiterations of things that have existed pre-blockchain and post-Bitcoin as well. And I don't think that there's much new here other than that you have new waves of people and new kinds of people showing up. That might be the way in which it's different, but I don't think they contribute a whole lot to the change. Yeah,
I think it's actually more similar in 2015. When you posed the question, I was thinking more like, I don't know, 2012 or 11. Like there was a time when we were off the heels of the financial crisis. You had this like beleaguered group of like technical professionals.
Everybody hated bankers.
That were like these sort of like open source leaning, frankly, a little communist leaning even in some weird ways, but not entirely. Also very libertarian leaning, weirdly. And there was, I think, a lot of like community cohesion back then. I think that the literacy level was significantly higher as well. And then I've seen this go increasingly fat tail. Now we have like the /biz crowd, which that wasn't around earlier. That's a whole thing now. I would even say that might be the majority of like the online like culture now.
Could that just be because there's more people, so there's more?
I think so.
There's more little factions that can build out into this.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It's just
denominational. You have denominational content at that point too. Yeah. The hygiene obsession is out of control.
What is
the hygiene obsessions? The like reversion to purity of your bits is like something that has gotten, in my mind, like completely pronounced at this point. Where like, I think there's also more.
I don't think that's any different than it's always been, though.
Well, there was always. I think that there was a utopia.
Audiences.
There were different audiences, but I think that the utopia from like 13 or 15 or so had more to do with perhaps seeing Bitcoin used in a way that like equaled torrent or Tor or some degree of like microtransaction type of payments. Whereas now it seems like the ethic is more just like number go up. It's almost like a Yang Bucks kind of like mentality in many ways.
But it seems to me like, Chris, with you specifically, it seems like what you once rejected, you now accept the reality of, and you're just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna get on with my life. It is what it is.
There's a lot of that. I mean, like, I'm a little jaded, I saw so much. The other thing too, like you get to see behind the scenes after a point, and there's like I like to portray myself in varying ways that may or may not be who I am. But I will say that certain levels of observation, there's a degree of discomfort that I've found with some of the behaviors around here. But also, I don't see a lot of action happening in the way that I thought there was. Like right now, these bull runs are like nice financially, but they're a little incorrigible from like a community development or product development standpoint. And it's not to say that it's like the space is damned in any way. I think quite the opposite even, but it does make it hard to interact in the space because there's nothing but geniuses everywhere. And
that's the one that blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, like every few years you end up with a genius. I mean, remember CureCoin?
Yeah, right.
There was a genius young 13-year-old or whatever it was, 16-year-old who had developed CureCoin, and somehow CureCoin was going to cure cancer or something weird. Like there's so many of these projects that over the years, I mean, they're predicated on the notion that this 16 or 17-year-old who understands blockchain can solve a problem that scientists haven't been able to. It's a Theranos problem, right? It's like she showed up. She doesn't actually have an engineering degree, but you can't question it because she's young.
Did you watch the documentary about her?
I read the book. I watched the documentary.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I have not watched the documentary. I've heard about it, but I've listened to podcasts and read tons of articles.
I mean,
I watched it happen.
We kind of, really missed out even covering that in the show a bit.
So she ran it like you would run Google in the early days, but Google didn't, if you got things wrong with Google, people weren't going to die. And they just didn't care.
Well, that's the weird mistake, is that with Theranos, the only mistake she made wasn't lying to her investors. It was releasing a product that was medical.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was it, because it was medical.
The telos matters.
I think the history books are going to look at this as like a virtue investing period, because that's the common like thread in a lot of these things is like people want to put their money into virtue. And like one of the things that's really discussed, I think it's maybe the Frank Dodd Act that did this, I don't know, but a lot of the investment opportunities that we had in like the 90s seem to have vanished, but like the need is still there. And then we have, I guess,
which opportunities?
The small pump and dunk penny stocks, and like,
they're there.
It seems like for whatever reason,
you're just not in the penny stock business.
Oh, I agree.
That's all it is.
I fully agree, but it seems like the kids aren't into it the way that they were, or at least the spirit of it wasn't in some way. And I don't know why.
Because they're into Bitcoin.
Because they're into
I
right.
think that's
Exactly
what happened.
Yeah,
there.
this is the newest one. Yeah,
But that's been my. I mean, like with the ICO stuff, like in terms of talking about it, when people ask me what's going to happen with ICOs, I'm like, well, we have an entire set of regulations for ICOs. It's called pink sheet stocks. And all that will happen is you'll have pink sheet stock regulations map right on to ICO regulations, which takes out any efficiency that ICOs offer the space. One
of the weird things that I'm finding though is that like who's lobbying against ICOs? Like whose incentive exists to stop that? Because I don't think there is such an incentive.
I get that. I think you're right, but I think that was exactly the same with pink sheets. Maybe it was exactly the same.
Very well might be. Yeah. I mean, what's clearly happening, I think, again, is that like the regulatory
pink sheets
space
exist, by the way, for the exact same reason. And the Financial Times, I believe, exists because it originally was like doing analysis of pink sheets when they started coming out, and were doing exactly the same thing that ICOs are doing, and like one after the other. So that like people needed a rag basically to evaluate the merits of the claims of all of these companies.
Yeah, but it's slightly different now with these ICOs in that it's one, there's no international borders that stop you from being involved. There are exchanges where sometimes you don't even know where they are. You know, people can set up and create these things without really anyone kind of knocking on their door.
Until you go to sell it, and you have to sell it in exchange in America.
Yeah, but like some people...
You're talking about the state of regulations today, not about the state of regulations in like a month.
Yeah, but you can only regulate this in one way, or two ways, internationally or with America's iron fist, and that you're in trouble wherever you are in the world, America will come after you if you get this wrong.
Yeah, well, America regulates the banking sector internationally in so many ways. And so whatever happens here does seem to propagate generally. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer just to say that like the regulations of America end at its borders, because we've seen that evidenced not to be the case.
knows that's not true.
Yes, so many times in recent years. So, but back to the pink sheets, like what was the guiding principle of the performance and the mantra of that industry? Because
I mean, I'm not like
greed is
I'm not
central.
well versed in the pink sheet revolution, but I believe it was the reason that the Financial Times exists is largely because the pink sheet, when pink sheet started to propagate and people started doing it, like people were given the same stuff, time machines, refrigerator magnet, cancer cures, like just whatever the hell it was that they wanted to do, and they would do a pink sheet stock. And I mean, I think you see the same thing with the early tech boom. You had people basically going on to, not LinkedIn, but like, whatever the equivalent was, and trying to recruit people to take their, $55 a day company public.
On AOL.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And it's just, I mean, it's a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. And, I don't know. There's a sort of tragedy now. We talk about millennials not investing in stocks, and I think that probably eventually will be a tragedy if they continue with this notion that banking is wrong and that these regulations are bad and that stocks are bad. But I mean,
those millennials are here. This is where they're doing it.
Right. I'm saying they're doing it right now with Bitcoin, and maybe for now they'll make a lot of money. Who knows? And in the future they'll realize that they have to diversify a little bit. I don't know.
I think a lot of them don't care. I've got a 15-year-old, and trying to motivate him to care about stuff is really hard because he has everything easily.
He hasn't discovered cocaine yet.
Well, thankfully he won't. He's so sporty. I really hope not. No, but what I mean is like...
Does he listen to the show?
He's listened to some. He knows a bit about Bitcoin as well. There's a video on my YouTube.
Does he know it buys cocaine?
Is he a doomer? Is he a 15-year-old doomer?
What's a doomer?
The people that hate boomers.
There's zoomers, there's doomers, there's boomers, and you should understand those tropes. And it does demographically map to some people.
What I'm saying, like, he's had it so easy. Like my kids, for one birthday, they'll get more than I had my whole childhood. Like they've got iPad, iPhone, Macs. Yeah. They've got so much stuff,
and they're ungrateful.
They are. I remember this great tweet this guy put out. What was it? It was something like, "Oh, can somebody help me? My child is my millennial son is looking for some work experience as a CEO."
Well, I mean, I think the thing that people don't realize, and I think this is a really hard thing to realize that, you were guilty of as well, is that when you're born at a certain time and everything before you didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the world in which, they're entering and they're looking at it and they're seeing the world, filled with iPads and internet. And they don't remember that there's a day when you didn't have a PC.
Yeah.
We've also virtualized so much, everything from sex to clearly money, but exploration in various forms and on and on. So
going to museums now you can do on Google.
The simulation of like various experiences has been wonderful. But this may be like the consequence of that. Like we very well may just evolve to like a Matrix style living in a box thing.
We might already be in one.
Yeah.
According to
right.
Elon. He's got a good theory on it.
It's unfalsifiable.
I just think it's a religion where
exactly.
all that's going on here is programmers do what programmers do, which is I think it's hard because like you have a bunch of programmers in Silicon Valley, they hear this idea and programmers tend to think that they're godlike and that they can program anything and make anything happen. So what do? You make a religion that puts programmers at the center of your universe.
And it gives something stoners to talk about.
Of course,
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I just think it's funny that there's this
business.
movement. Yeah, there's this movement away from religion, and then all of a sudden now you're right back to it, explaining God as like a 16-year-old with with an acne problem, sitting at his computer.
We just breezed 2 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We keep going. I think we got history here. We could go 5 hours. People were asking for it.
Well, that's what people said. But like, I'm running. Where are we going to go? I mean,
Give us a subject. Zoo
Well,
animals.
Future,
do you know what?
Futurarchy?
No, I want to know more about the podcast, right? So I know.
We really haven't talked about that yet.
Well, it's a difficult area maybe to go in. But I tell you, one thing was quite funny. I wrote down some of the reviews on iTunes.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
You're generally a middle of the road review, like you're Marmite.
That
Do you know
sounds-
Marmite?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know the Marmite campaign in the UK?
No.
They advertise it. So the way they do the advertising, you love it or you hate it. You're one or the other. So they did this genius one whereby you could do DNA tests and you would find out if you were a lover or a hater.
Oh, that's great.
And people lied. You didn't tell me I liked it. It's things like that. So do you want to hear the negative ones or the positive ones first?
Negative.
I didn't know there were positive ones.
I've got two of each. So the negative, the first one, the hosts don't seem to know much of anything about altcoins, promote pump and dump, rude to guests. The second one was...
Yes.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. The second one was, this has to be the worst Bitcoin podcast out there. These two Florida guys trick Bitcoin and blockchain personalities into coming onto the show just to make fun of them.
True.
Yeah.
fair.
Also,
Yes,
yeah.
also, yeah.
Let's go with the good ones.
Yeah.
First one, excellent content. These guys are extremely competent, highly intelligent, and not scammers.
That's a dog or a cat.
And the next one is essential listening for anyone needing to understand the world of Bitcoin. No bullshit here. What I got from this, and this is, I think what I got from this is that you do know what you're talking about, actually. I'm going to talk to why it's a shame your podcast doesn't exist anymore. But you do. You definitely do. Listen to the way you talked about the myth of the blockchain and what I heard in my episodes. But you're going to definitely trigger people. And that's what this said to me. You hit the money for a number of people and you triggered people who had bags or a belief in something or possibly a belief with some doubt, but it triggered people. It's a great fucking show.
Thank you.
I mean, I think there was an ironic problem with Bitcoin Uncensored, which is that we were, exploring everything ourselves and giving people sort of our own impressions of the world, including our own sort of thoughts on investment. And I think a lot of people, despite us telling them not to listen to us, followed us down that path and then really regret not investing all their money in Ethereum early on. And I think that's one group of people that isn't happy. And I think there are other people who just don't care. I mean, I get it a lot.
The people who have that complaint, I think, are inordinately greedy and are being unreasonable.
I think that's true. I don't think
because they don't remember the history, right? Either
No.
not Steam. What was the other one? BitShares.
BitShares
was just as likely to
was
be
exactly the
Ethereum.
same thing. It
didn't have a Joe Lubin. That was the only difference.
And it grew real quick.
And how did you know what Joe Lubin would be or who had him? So there had to be a case that you could find that one of these did take off, I think. But just it's easy to say retroactively, oh, it was Ethereum, but that was not easy or obvious at the time.
It was, but it also I think if you go back to old shows, I don't think that we said it wouldn't take off. I think, like I said, I think we said it would very possibly moon.
If it wasn't, I don't think if it wasn't for Joe Lubin, I don't think it would have taken off. I think it would have just done the same thing.
That could very well be true. I think there's a lot of
BitShares did.
DApps. Yeah, but BitShares took off too, and then people sold at the top, and then Larimer announced his leaving of it.
Joe Lubin brought in it was mostly conservatives that were in the space prior to Joe Lubin. And like the innovation of Ethereum was that Joe Lubin brought the progressives into the space, and they offered them like a Silicon Valley product, whereas before it was a libertarian product.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't think that's false in any way.
Right. So that's what I think I saw there.
I bumped into Joe Lubin in a hotel in Brooklyn.
Is he fat?
Bit smaller. It's smaller than me, I would say.
Should have walked around him.
So I'm in this hotel in Brooklyn called the Hoxton, and I'm having some lunch, and I see him, and he's going in an air swap hoodie, which is one of their investments, and I'm looking, thinking, I can recognize you. Where do I know you from? I sat there scratching my head. I was like, because I've done an air swap interview. I went to their office.
I have the strongest desire to run up to him and put a condom over his.
No, so I went up to him. And I was like, I'm really, really sorry. I know you from somewhere. Do you work at AirSwap? And he was like, no. And he was really quite short with me. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking, I'm not going to let it go. I was like, I'm really sure I've met you. Like, I've been to AirSwap. He's like, no, it's one of my companies. I was like, what do you mean by that? He said, I've got a company called Consensus. And I was like, you're Joe Lubin, aren't you? And he said, yeah. And he was kind of fine, but obviously wanted rid of me. Actually, no, he wasn't. He was just quite blunt. But whatever.
Get out of here!
But I think, do you know what? I think at the time, that was right before the announcement of the difficulties that Consensus were having. And therefore, I get it. It's probably a stressful time, whatever. I'm seeing him Friday, I think. We've got the Ethereal Summit.
Got a date.
I'll go hat shopping. He really needs some help there.
He does.
He needs some hat help.
Or you can put a condom on his head.
So what do you think? So what do you think of the deal with Consensus? Because like he's put a lot of money in, he's put his money behind it. Bold statement. I'm going to do what I do here. Go middle of the road. I'm going to say he's really tried to support and build something there. Obviously, there's a financial benefit, but he spent a lot of money there. Now they're raising money.
I think he spent a lot of money because he wanted to be important. I don't think he cared whether the stuff worked. I think that's pretty evident.
I think he believed everything that he said. I think that he found in ignorance. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, and then because of his enthusiasm, he was able to share that with others, and it became infectious.
I think that's correct, but I also don't think he cared whether it worked. I think he was like chasing. He wanted to be the priest, the high priest of Bitcoin. And he started a company and he invested in everything. And I think his thought was that if he invests in everything, then when something works, he'll be the high priest of that thing.
Yeah.
And I think what's surprising to him is that nothing has worked.
Well, I mean, but his company has clearly produced some profit for him, even if he did nothing to achieve it.
I don't think that's true at all.
No, I think no. I mean, they're trying to raise.
I think Ethereum produced profit for him.
Certainly, yes.
Yeah. And then, but you know what? I mean, like his company may have been
the church that brought in the people
that made him money. I mean,
better than Balaji did in that respect.
That's true.
I missed that.
Balaji did the butt box. He was going to bring in Cisco with the butt box, and that did not happen.
He's just left Coinbase.
That's correct. Yeah. He's probably going to go into something.
Because he sold earn.com to them, which weirds me out entirely. I mean, to me that's the whole weird. A lot of those like incestuous transactions, they're really interesting to me because you have these people who come in and they're touted as the high priest of Bitcoin. And I don't think that you have to be fairly old at this point, which is always astounding to me. At what point someone becomes old because you come in and you think that you've missed everything. Like when I got here, there were, I don't know, not that many Bitcoiners, and I thought that I had missed all of the party.
That's true.
And I remember even when we were at TNABC, the first one, I was like, these people. We walked into a room, and this is a story I tell often, but we walked into a room and there was a VC on stage, and he says, I've been in Bitcoin a long time, and this is January, and he goes, I was here. I was one of the first VCs. I invested when Bitcoin was $100, and I look at Chris and I go, that was August.
Yeah. Well, so I'm coming up to 2.5 years now, and I'm still new around here.
But do you remember? Yeah. Do you remember when Circle happened and the hype that occurred? I mean, there were literally 87 Bitcoiners. So it was really easy to create hype, and everyone thought that Circle was going to bring in everybody. It was going to bring in new people. It was exactly the same thing as Coinbase, but somehow it was a revolution in how we were going to purchase coins. Was
it Jeremy? What's his last name? Was it Jeremy Allaire or something?
Yeah, Jeremy Allaire.
Yeah, he brought his affinity value. At some level, that was I think what was being added to the space.
He was the founder of Brightcove and all these other things that had made money previously.
The same thing Balaji got people excited about. It was Balaji. And
He's got like 12 exits.
Yeah, right. And you only ever heard his name once in a headline, but that was better than nothing. And then it got ballooned from there.
But everyone does that.
Well,
Roger talks about the fact that he was a successful business person.
But no one cares about Roger's business
So
success.
what I'm saying is, like, all these people who come in with gravitas money talk about, like, the history of what they've done.
Roger's entire credential is that he sold fireworks and sent them in the mail to somebody and then got arrested for it. And that's what, like, really solidified his libertarianism, I think.
At the time, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nobody cared
now,
about
now
memory
he
dealers.
wants to tell you that he's a big businessman.
Yeah,
but,
yes.
But what I'm saying, they all come with something beforehand. Brightco for Jeremy or,
Well, they rise out of the myth. They come with their story of conquest.
Yeah.
I mean, have you developed a white paper story yet, Peter? How advanced are you in your Bitcoining?
Well, I'm not even very good at writing, so I wouldn't even.
You don't need a white paper. You have to have a story when you get here about what happened to you when you first read the white paper. Like me, I first read the white paper. I went into a fit of seizures, pooped my pants, and then was in the hospital for 16 days.
It's the Christians have like a reborn moment, right? It's the same concept.
What happened to you?
When I read the white paper.
Yeah. You have to have a story, and it has to be right.
Well,
so don't tell it until it's ready, because
I know
you got
it.
one shot.
I know it.
Okay.
I got to page 3 and I said, I don't fucking understand this, so I'm not going to read it.
It's a bad story.
But if you think about it, that is all I've ever said. I don't get this stuff.
What was Andreas Antonopoulos's? He read the white paper and he like had to wear diapers and have his mother come and like nurse him to health or something like that.
People like compete over like the degree to which they've been affected by this paper. It's how you can know to trust them.
The white paper never affected me at all.
Well, then no one's going to trust you.
That means you're stupid. You have to come up with a story.
Yeah, but I
think you're missing the point, Peter. It doesn't have to affect you. You have to have a story.
Yeah, but I'm a contrarian journalist now.
Yeah, so you have to have a great story.
So I have no story.
And you have to present it with all the irony.
No, but that's the truth of it. First time I read it, I didn't understand economics. I don't understand tech. I read it and I just went, huh. And actually, I read it probably, the first time I read it in full was probably at least 6 months after I started really getting into Bitcoin. I did the first time, I was like, I don't get it. And I've read it again and I still don't get it. And I don't want to get it because I don't need to get it. I think it's an irrelevant document right now.
I think that's
a historical piece in the space.
Yeah. It's historical.
But it's really its value.
I think that's an unorthodox opinion, and I don't think it's wrong. But it's just interesting to me that, like, I mean, credibility in the space. I mean, you're right. There is, all sorts of ways to get it. And we're talking about like Balaji and stuff, and he was knighted by A16Z, and Roger was knighted by you hear his claims. He credentials himself in exactly the same way. He was the first investor in Bitcoin, which those are, I feel like, credentials that started when he started debating and pushing for Bcash. Hope that makes everybody angry.
People, you are probably seeing this for the first time in your life, but people who like consume content, they consume a very processed version of the events. Like what actually happened is often like tautological is the term, like it is what it is. And like you as the reporter ascribe an intent to it and you create meaning and you create a story. But that's not to say that whatever you did or even like what major publications do is accurate. It's just that is how the meat is made and packaged for consumption. And I don't know, that's what happens when people arrive too. Like they themselves are beholden to that process, whether or not they're cognizant of it. And it becomes part of how humans like create some degree of trust and meaning in the information that's presented, as a witness testimony. Yeah,
I guess. And you are right. I am experiencing this for the first time and I'm not always comfortable with it.
It's very creepy.
It's extremely creepy. And like for me, going to Charlottesville was like a manifestation of that to the nth degree. So going into that, I didn't know what it would become because it was just going to be this like alt-right thing. I was like, okay, let's see a bunch of crazies like being crazy. It'd be great. I always like this kind of stuff. And then it became like this historic event. And I started watching how the news was reporting it. And I was like, well, that's not true. And that didn't happen that way. And like, well, that's a jump. And I understand why they did it for a lot of reasons. I don't even like begrudge them. The audience demands that it be packaged and moralized in a way that they can consume it. Otherwise, it's outside of their like window of acceptance. But these things, that bridge, that divide between content producer and consumer is a chasm that cannot be bridged, I don't think, until you're into the space doing it.
Yeah, and also you have to learn to adjust to deal with the reactions to the packaging.
Right, exactly. You will be moderated by the crowd.
Well, which is certainly happening, but also you've got to try and create some distance between it because otherwise you spend too much time defending it.
Oh, 100%.
I've done that. I'm guilty of that.
Well, that makes Twitter money. That's why that happens.
Right. Yeah. True. Because
maybe
what I found is that someone will say something, and it's their opinion of what I've done, but I know me, and I know that's not true. So someone will say to you, you're only doing that interview because it's controversial and you'll get downloads and your show is, you make millions of downloads.
We experienced that.
They're
a lot.
morality tests. I just demand to fail them because I don't give a fuck.
But the thing is, I can turn around to them and say to them, well, look at my history of guests. It's always been the same. It's pretty much Bitcoin with other people. And I didn't make any money for the first 11 months. Okay. But now I'm making money. You're making that judgment. Yeah. So I found myself defending. And I found even when you have a solid defense, they don't care. So I was just kind of I've been trying to tell myself to stop caring and stop responding and just ignore people now because Joe Rogan, by the way, I've come to really appreciate what he does. I think he's done something absolutely brilliant. He's created an environment where any opinion is allowed to be discussed without it kind of descending in some kind of stupid argument.
He's the new Art Bell in some ways, if you remember that show.
No, I don't.
Coast to Coast. Every night they would discuss aliens and spirits and stuff like that.
Right.
And I mean, that's what Rogan has essentially created is Art Bell for millennials, which I like. I think there's a space for that. I think that's very...
But if you heard him talk about trolls and stuff, he said, you just got to ignore them. He said, they're the green frogs, just get away from it.
Well, in our case, we just conformed to them. We became exactly what we were accused of, you're thieves. Okay, we're thieves. You're this bad person. You're this bad. Okay, fine.
This is the online world. It's not like the real world. So labels are kind of meaningless in a lot of ways online. And frankly, I think they actually give you power, if anything, because they amplify your voice.
It's your girlfriend says you're sick thing. You have a mental disorder. Okay. I have a mental disorder. I want to go out tomorrow. Can't. I have a mental disorder. It's
right. It's power. Exactly.
It literally is leverage.
So this happened for you guys. Was there a tipping point where you started to realize?
Well, yeah, we accidentally kind of walked into it at first.
Kind of. No, not really. I mean, what happened is early on, we were asked by a guy who wanted to do a counterparty update. Right. And he asked Chris to do it actually, because Chris at the time was pushing to be famous in some ways.
I wanted to be seen in this.
Yeah, he wanted to be seen. Yeah. And I did not. I had gone out, done a lot of the videos. I was always behind the camera. I did not I remember when we got banned from NCAA forever, permanently forever and ever.
Yes.
Which is funny because it's our first football game. And we were let in by security. So, but we were banned from NCAA forever and ever. And at one moment in that video, Chris said my name and I asked him to pull it out at the time. So I was unnamed. And I remember Chris asked me if I wanted to do the podcast with him, or it was just the end of it, just like the counterparty update. And I said to him, very explicitly, no. And he said, why? And I said, because then it'll become popular and I'll have obligations to the audience.
So this is before the podcast has started?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can go, I mean, there's the first podcasts are not Bitcoin Uncensored. They're on, what was it? What's the show called? XCP?
It was counterparty update or something. Yeah.
And we're just at the end. And what happened is we began to consume the show, and he would do. At first, it was 5 minutes at the front, and became 10 minutes, then 15 minutes, and then soon it was him 5 minutes and us 40 minutes.
Yeah,
but
it took a life on its own.
Well, what happened is he hated it because we would just swear. And, we swear for effect. I think that it's pretty easy not to swear, but it's also funny at times to throw a good fuck in there.
It conveys sincerity.
Yeah, it conveys some sincerity. What's that?
I get, so after the Ryzen interview, I had 4 emails complaining about my swearing because I don't normally, I swear a lot in live. But I don't swear a lot on the podcast.
Time out of their day to write that email to you?
Well, one of them was...
Who is this person?
No, one was fair. He said, I was listening to the car. Sometimes I listen with the kids. And you were like, F this, F that. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a fair point. And then a couple of others. But
that's what they got. That's why we did our shows from the bathroom.
Well, I don't know. Well, this is close to a bathroom.
This is close. But everybody, I mean, the thing is, I mean, we got the story all the time. Again, particularly men. It was available for women, but only a few women, shout out to Adela. Mostly men listened to it, and they would say, I listen to it in the car when I'm driving alone or when I'm in the bathroom because my wife doesn't let me listen to this content. And that was always very funny to me.
It makes sense now. The more fat tail you are, the more moderated you'll be.
I mean, that's the reason for the name is that what happened is on the show, Adam Levine of the Let's Talk Bitcoin Network wanted to edit everything that we did.
Right.
And because he didn't like the swearing. So you would hear the shows and it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 45 minutes of us completely clean, which drove them nuts because when we realized what they were doing, we would throw in more swearing just to make the editing process more difficult. And then we would talk about the fact that they edited us, and people asked us to do to host the uncensored versions.
Ah, so that's the story. Yeah. Right. Okay. So what was the first uncensored show?
Bitcoin Uncensored #1.
You have to look at that.
No,
did you always have guests from the start, or was it just the two of you?
It was just the two of us originally. Yeah. The guests were an innovation later on.
This was at a time too before I guess YouTube phenomenon was as pervasive, and I think podcasts had been around, but it wasn't, for whatever reason, I don't think it was quite as pervasive as we see now.
I mean, we were debating at the time whether podcasts were even a thing.
Right.
You thought they were. I thought they weren't.
There was in a doldrum at the time. They weren't as popular as they were earlier or later.
I mean, I'm glad you stopped in some ways because you opened up a space.
I think that's true. I mean, I tend to think that Bitcoin Uncensored had its time. I think that fame is hard, and
yeah, it is.
It's really hard. I have rules about fame. I've always had rules about fame, and I think the thing that people don't realize is that there's a point where fame, your life is no longer your own.
That is true.
And I think what happens with Bitcoin Uncensored is that it didn't get to that point, but it would have if we had.
Well, it must have got close. There must have been signs.
Well, I think we were a month away or 2 months away when it ended before that happening, in which case the ICO boom would have happened, and we probably would have had 100,000 subscribers or none. It would have either crashed or it would have grown.
I think it would have crashed actually at that point. It was weird. If it wasn't for the ICO mania, I think it would have been 100,000. But with the ICO mania, the pressures to silence us were so great. Or at least it was for me, and that was a big part of what happened to me after that, after the breakup.
Like how were they trying to silence you? Tell me.
People first off,
because I want to know if there's one of the really interesting things of doing this for me is learning if there's similarities, and so for example, I don't have. So some people have said have a co-host. I don't have a co-host because I always think, I talked to you about this beforehand. It goes back to business. Yeah. Whenever I had a business, a 50-50 business will never work. There'll always be some kind of failure, and usually it's never a good split. And that's why I've never had a
businesses
co-host.
are divorce.
Yeah, they are.
If you I mean,
so what kind of pressures were you getting?
Well, you're gonna. I mean, you see already. You've got a lawsuit here from Craig Wright.
Yeah, but I asked for that.
But that very well might be. But the degree of attention that you would even be nominated out of the entire pool of Bitcoiners for that degree of attention is itself
no. But I literally said, "Can you sue me?"
Okay.
And then I was saying to Calvin, Calvin, when do I get my lawsuit? Give me a fucking lawsuit. So that I've asked for.
Well, you fair enough, but you would still find that, I think, at any point of. I mean, I use that as an easy anecdote because it was there, but
yeah, okay, but I get your point. Yeah,
and I've said this a number of times too with the ICO rise, that the biggest problem with it, what we were lucky with when we were doing our show, is that nobody had money,
right?
And so you'd make $150,000 if you did an ICO back in that day, and you're not going to spend it suing somebody for defamation. Whereas today, I mean. I think that would be probably the blunt instrument of every single company that did an ICO and raised $150 million. Let's advocate $500,000 to suing every single person that said the word scam.
Do you think you would have got sued then?
Oh, certainly.
Constantly.
Yeah. Another thing happens too is that the people that are intolerant will generally invent things that you did, or that, they will label you with, that some other people, some bygone, some bystander kind of person would see and then attach to your name. And so the degree to which you cause friction in the movement is the degree to which you're going to deal with unfounded claims in general. So I mean, we just kind of embraced it, which was a great strategy that I think we did. But, I was a registered sex offender, still am, if anyone cares.
What?
Yeah. You can look at this. You can look this up. I mean, but if you're explaining, you're losing in many ways. So I just go with it. If you want to say something outrageous about me, then fine. Tell all your friends. They'll come around looking.
We're both heroin addicts.
Yes, there's right. Flocka, smokers.
Hold on.
On the regular.
So what are these?
That was the worst show we ever did.
Are these jokes or these serious things or what?
Doesn't matter.
You piss somebody off, they'll invent something, and then it becomes the Apple game. And before you know it, you've got a woman looking at you why did you rape so and so on this day?
Oh no, I get it. I get it.
The point is that you ask people to evaluate claims and not people. And so if you remove the person from the claim, it becomes very difficult most humans can't really wrap their minds around it. They don't know what to do. So you tell them you're the worst person, and now they have to evaluate the claim against, because you're already the worst, but you're making these claims and they're listening to you. And so you can't be more discredible. You dig a hole for yourself so deep that like crawling out of it seems impossible. And what you have is you have a bunch of people who are willing to, jump in the mud with you and think that they're superior to you. And then they get out of it and they realize they have shit all over them.
Well, no, so I get that, right? So like, I've been open and admitted I had a cocaine addiction at one point, like quite a bad one, like went really, really bad. And
I should have made that joke about your kid.
No, it's cool. Well, do you know what the thing was? He Googled me recently,
really,
and found so much like people just being fucking mean, right? But also found me talking about this, so I had to explain it to him, and actually it was fine. It was cool.
Oh, your soul is going to be inspected in the public.
I know, but it's cool, fine, I get it. But then, and I've always been honest about it because, like, I don't have a problem with people doing drugs, but like substance abuse is dangerous. I felt it, I got away from it. And then, you kind of forget about it. And then I'm getting to this argument with Craig Wright, and Kevin Pham's going, he's had a failed marriage, he was a substance abuser, blah, blah, blah. Why you...
Kevin's never been to Florida.
And just using it as an attack vector.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why you would ever use somebody who's a recovering addict, use that as an attack vector against them. Like,
because he thought it was something you were ashamed of.
You're also not a person to him. You're just a picture on a screen.
Yeah, but it's such a degenerate thing to do.
Well, that's what he would say about your cocaine addiction.
Well, yeah.
So the better thing is just to be a
Are
degenerate.
you surprised? Like,
I'm not surprised, but what I'm saying is I've gone from a nobody in Bedford, little town in England, nothing, to suddenly there's a lot of attention on it. So when you talked about fame, this isn't me saying before someone like tweets out Pete McGorman says he's famous. I don't think I am, but what I'm saying is I recognize there's an increased scrutiny on my work and more people are aware of me, and then more people who want to fuck with me.
Well, the problem with fame is that you don't get to decide whether you're famous.
Yeah,
right?
That's true, yeah.
You don't. It just is or isn't.
Yeah.
And, with increased numbers of people knowing you, you have more people doing weird things, more people showing up and just crazies.
You also have identity management issues that most people don't have.
You have to have a home Peter and a public Peter.
Yeah. But there's not very much difference between those.
Well, in our case, it was easy because
yeah.
we just embraced the identities and fully lived them for like the time.
This is one of the nice things about Bitcoin. If you were running for office, it would be a terrible.
Yeah,
it'd be really bad.
Yeah, but I'm the idiot from Bedford, and I'm cool with that. I don't even like the word fame. Just notoriety or awareness of your existence.
What it is.
Yeah, there's just that awareness, and when you talk about that, and you were aware it's coming. I'm kind of like in that place now where some of it's starting to happen, and it's like I've complained a couple of times about, and in a hypocritical way. So I'll be a troll and then complain about being trolled, and then you get called a snowflake or whatever. But the pressure's there; it definitely exists. It's hard work.
Yeah, and you have to decide to what degree you're going to acquiesce to.
Everything they to lose, they have nothing to lose.
Correct.
It's a very lopsided calculation.
So you missed the show.
Yes and no. I missed the times. That's for damn sure. And I missed the show in many ways as a result of the times.
They would have gotten us killed, though.
A lot of people missed the show.
Eventually, I think.
We would go into dark alleys and chase down the worst people.
Oh, no kidding. I mean, I've continued with that in many different ways, and I've seen some crazy things. And some of it made onto the show and some of it didn't. But
like what? Give me what's like a good.
Well, going through
example?
Southeast Asia was an adventure. There's that. Charlottesville was an adventure. There's that.
What happened in Charlottesville?
Someone died.
Someone did die to that one. Yeah, I was there for that. That was so. There was
a big national event.
It was a big national event. So at the time, I was watching.
Hold on, is this to do with the Black Lives Matter thing? And
basically,
the Nazi thing. Yeah,
the Unite the Right was like this.
It happened when you were there.
Well, I saw Bitcoin kind of going in and out of the Daily Stormer at the time, and I was like, oh, this is a perfect story. Let's see what's going on with this. And then I heard about that going on when I started fishing those communities to see what the hell was going on. And then it kind of led me into this just all out brawl thing going on, which was, at some level of Bitcoin exposure, perhaps tangential to the main event, but it could have gotten weird for sure. There was at one point in the video that I had from that event where this kid comes by and throws a smoking device, which I didn't know what it was at the time. And I just filmed it really for posterity. I was like, okay, well, that's a bomb and it's going to explode. And I guess I might as well get it on film. Why not? And it wasn't that far from me. Unfortunately, it was just a smoke bomb. But that was kind of a frightening moment for me.
Yeah, we once. I mean, there were so many things. We would go down to the Broward bus station, and everyone was telling us at Flocka
Yeah.
Flocka would turn you into a zombie. So we went down there and found someone who would smoke Flocka in front of us and interviewed him. And like, we were just doing whatever we could for shows just to, I mean, like there's things that we would do just to go see for ourselves. Apparently this thing turns into a zombie. Let's go see if we get our faces eaten off.
It's kind of Vice style what you're doing there, though.
Yeah, it was.
It was more than just Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think Bitcoin does that though. Like people always say, you know, what your favorite show is, my Lynn Olbrich one or my sex worker one. All those kind of topics that are like sisters of Bitcoin, but not about Bitcoin.
It's
find
Bitcoin
it
intersectionalism. Like people don't realize that there is.
It's true.
That Bitcoin has these intersections, and you know, for us, drugs. I mean, how do you think people are getting fucking flocking into America?
Yeah.
You know, you think it's like someone's showing up with like a bag of dollars, or do you think it's probably Bitcoin? Because it's probably Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or I mean, yeah, you also have like the Panama Papers. You have like these every once in a while these things with the news, and I'm like, well, there's Bitcoin leads somewhere.
I know that there's
Bitcoin there's going to be Bitcoin there.
Smells like Bitcoin.
Right, exactly. And then
can know.
invariably
You
it
just
comes
know.
out, and you learn.
But it's a super interesting area to go into.
That's where all of the interest is.
And we would,
yeah,
and like it's
that's also why it's dangerous.
It's a big butthole, and it smells, and you're not supposed to go and smell there, but like we would. We'd
Wherever
stick our
the
nose
power,
right in it.
wherever the power really is in society is generally where things get dangerous. Or at least wherever there's like the power is like uncertain and it's in like contention. And
Or where you can threaten power.
Right, exactly, right. So like wherever that's always where it's going to be
Or
interesting.
where people are ignoring power, right? I mean, it's just really
yeah, if you can find that, that's usually hard to find. But yeah,
those are hard to find. Well, I mean, I think that's where a lot of the drug industry is. Like that, you know, the whole thing was very like, you know, for me, I think Bitcoin Uncensored very much felt like an art project, and you know, I guess in terms of like your question earlier about missing it, like I think it ended when it needed to end.
I agree with that.
I think that was like, I think the end of it was a signature on the show, and it was the end of it.
So was there some like weird self-capitulation going on there?
Well, it was the whole thing was. I know we haven't really talked about it. You know, like the whole thing was like he and I.
We don't need to.
Yeah, well, I mean, he and I have been in close like social proximity for a long time, and then I went one way, and then he kind of went the other as a result of even what was on the show. And like without dredging all that up, like I think that was probably a big part of the.
I mean, how long did the show run for?
2 years.
I mean, you change as people, right, during that period, right? Like, you can be, like I had it when I had a company, and you can be on the same mission on day one, and you're aligned, and it's fun, it's crazy, and then it grows into this thing, but over time, you kind of change, and then you're suddenly not on the same page, and things sometimes just end, and I guess that's why I won't have a co-host, because I don't want to get
fair.
there.
I mean, I think that it's absolutely fair. I think that's true, and I think for us, I mean, at least for me, I felt like sort of the end was like a nice time to sign the painting, if you will.
I don't think it's been replaced though. We don't have that that healthy skepticism.
I don't think you can.
Those times are done.
It was a different time in Bitcoin. I don't think that. I think I'm glad that the space opened up. That like our leaving gave a lot of people their space. There's a lot of good shows that have come out, and I know that a lot of them have been inspired by BU. I think that's great. And to the extent that those shows are inspired by you, I think that I'm honored to have a part of that. And I'm also glad that it's kind of a nice secret that maybe the old timers get to play with and remember, and that some of the noobs don't even know about. I enjoy being in conversations with noobs who ask me who the hell I am. I think that that's great.
There's like a cadence to the show that correlated with the timeline of Bitcoin, like the apex of what was it 2017 or something of like ICO mania, really hit like the top of a wave. So,
what was the final show? Do you remember?
I was in Thailand. I mean, I guess I was in Thailand, right? And we were doing them. I was probably in some like.
Probably an opium den.
Probably like an opium den, and yeah, it really wasn't a nice place. I'm sure.
His face or something gross.
I think it was in. Oh, geez, I don't remember what the name of that city is. Might have been. Who knows? That place is great.
Well, listen, I'm glad you came on. We've set a record as well. We've outdone the Pomp Show.
We can make it twice as long if you want, Peter.
Well, no, we could, but like. I'm not like you guys. Like, this is long for me. I'm like, you see me doing my stretches now.
He gave up his cocaine.
Plus, also, do you know what? Like, I think that's the perfect ending to it. You know, I think that's like a nice way to round it up. It's great to meet you, like for the first time. We've spoken a bunch of times, and that's an evolving relationship you and I have had.
I love what you're doing. I follow it, and I think it's wonderful.
Well, and I always appreciate your time. Whenever I ask you something, and you've been really patient with me as well at times where I look back and think, oh, what an idiot I've been. So I get
There's
that.
no right answers, honestly. There's just people trying their best.
But
I
get it. Like from all the people I've spoken to, I spoke to 2 people in advance of the show. They're both super pumped about it, but gave me some really helpful advice into prep, which was great. I'm enjoying going back and listening to them. Ever want to do this again, it would be an absolute pleasure. We can do this again whenever you guys want. But yeah, I just want to say a big thanks, man.
Thank you.
Men.
Yeah. We should probably do the Cooter sign-offs.
Well, why not?
What's that?
You want to lead it?
Sure. This is Junseth chunking up the deuce of the south. The mass is in, go in peace. St. Catherine, pray for us.
Okay, so what did you make of that? Did you enjoy that one? For all you old Bitcoin Uncensored fans, how was it? How did that compare to the old stuff they did? Like, I know it's not the same because there is this history that's gone on, but I still felt like it was like a really good show. I still felt like they had a rapport. It's probably the most fun I've ever had recording the show, and I would definitely do it with them again. It was also really interesting for me to cover some of the difficulties I've had in producing the podcast because, look, it isn't easy. There are a lot of pressures, there are a lot of challenges. You know, when you want to explore subjects or narratives or, you know, get into different areas, sometimes people are happy or they aren't. It is quite a tough thing to do. So being able to discuss that with them, talk about their experiences and kind of find out what they went through and how they dealt with it was super, you know, I got a lot out of it. Also, going back and listening to their podcast has been really useful for me to just learn more. You know, they're really experienced guys, are really knowledgeable guys, much brighter than I am, much smarter than I am. And in a space that is flooded with scams or kind of weird projects or stupid things, they had a really good way of kind of breaking them down. And it's definitely something that I've learned from. So yeah, look, I was really glad to do this. And again, I just want to say a massive thanks to both Chris and Junseth for agreeing to. You know, a lot has happened and they both went out on their limb, and I'm really grateful that they came onto my show and did it. As I said in the intro, if you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. And also, if you want to support the show, there's so many things you can do. Whether you want to leave me a review, or you want to become a sponsor, or you want to become a patron, it's all explained on my website. If you head over to whatbitcoindid.com, click on the support section, that will explain everything. I'm not going to go through the list today because I've just got to New York and I'm pretty tired, trying to get myself ready for the Magical Crypto Conference and Consensus. It's going to be a really interesting week in New York. I've got loads of interviews booked. I can't wait to get them out for you. But yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You know my email address now is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I can't wait to hear from you.